Warrior Lore. Chapter 800. Although 29 other cadets had also cleared this course, it was spectacular not just because cadets in their final years were numbered in the thousands, but this meant that every other cadet that had completed it was a final year cadet. A final year cadet was 2 classes above the second years, and yet a second year had managed to finish a course that many other seniors hadn't completed. Are you sure? One of them had to ask again. That's why his name was skipped on the list. I could show you footage of his time here if you want to see, the training officer voiced out before moving to make some settings. In a few moments, different footage were being displayed on the holographic screen, and all 3 inspectors watched with awe-stricken faces. How is he improving at such a quick pace? The female inspector could not hide her astonishment. This is in no way normal. He seems to be displaying strength beyond the echo rank. Frightening progress has been noted. This needs to be brought to the attention of the higher-ups, the other 2 inspectors voiced out as well as they took note. Meanwhile, underwater, a charming figure with floating dirty blonde hair sat at the bottom of a river. His legs were crossed as he sat at the bottom of the river, with his eyes closed and his upper body bare. His glistening smooth skin and his muscular frame were quite visible under the river even though it was dimly lit. His hands were clasped together as he stayed silently in the same position for a long time, without moving an inch and breathing in or out. It almost looked like he was a statue dumped in the water, but his glistening skin and his floating long dirty blonde hair depicted otherwise. After what seemed like hours, his eyelids finally twitched and he slowly opened his eyes. A golden glow appeared in his eyeballs for a moment before disappearing. He slowly stood to his feet and began to walk underwater. His movement was sluggish and carefree, but it radiated with mightiness and pride. In a few seconds of walking, his head poked out from the surface of the river, and his figure was revealed bit as bit the further he walked. The rays of light coming from the sun shone on his drenched figure as his hair, which was initially floating underwater, dropped down to his shoulders. He looked so godly as he walked out of the river with just his white pants. Well-chiseled abs were displayed with his broad and muscular chest as he arrived at the shore. Daily task completed, 3/3, stay underwater for 6 hours without breathing. He stared at the system notification for a few seconds before letting it clear from his line of sight. Why not make it 12 hours next time? So he'll be unable to attend any of the camp drills. Gustav said internally with obvious rhetorical hints. I don't generate the tasks. I mean I do, but I don't. It's hard to explain and your puny brain would be unable to comprehend. The system voiced out in his head. Sure. Just say you lack control, Gustav said internally with a light chuckle. Who's the puny one now? Gustav said with a tone of ridicule. I live inside you. I could cause both your kidneys and your liver to fail right now, the system reminded him. Why attack my liver now? Aren't my kidneys enough for you? You'd still be alive if both kidneys were gone, but if I was to add your liver to the fray now, The cute, girly voice of the system echoed in his mind, along with her evil laughter. Fine, you win this round, Gustav said internally as he arrived in front of a tree up ahead. Currently, Gustav was looking like he had grown a little bit above 6 feet, and his body had become broader. His skin glistened like that of a baby's. His hair had grown so long, it was covering his nape. It looked like the 5 months that went by were spent doing a lot of training as Gustav's presence radiated pressure, subconsciously. Warrior Lord. SSHHHSSHHHHH. His body temperature suddenly rose immensely, causing all the water on his body to dry up. Zing, his upper MBO outfit appeared in his hand as he prepared to put it on. How long do you intend to watch? Gustav suddenly voiced out as he wore the top of his uniform. Damn. You noticed me? A feminine voice was heard from up ahead, but no one could be seen in the vicinity. Just because you became very tiny doesn't mean you'll be able to escape my range of perception, Gustav said while staring at a part of the tree. Within the cracks on the barks, a small that was barely visible suddenly flew out, passing Gustav's left shoulder area. Zium, a bright light shone behind Gustav, and a dark beauty appeared in place. Sheesh. You were looking hot as fuck when coming out from the river? You sure you ain't a reincarnation of some ancient god or some? She voiced out while staring at Gustav with a look of adorable. Gustav turned around with a nonchalant look and stared at her. Gods do not exist. Can't you guys let go of that fairy tale? It's been thousands of years already, he voiced out. Haha, everyone is entitled to their beliefs, Gustav, she said while moving her face closer to his, trying to inspect it. Angie sure is one lucky girl, she said while slightly tilting her face. Gustav placed his right hand on her face and pushed her backward. Your spittle is flying, he voiced out while proceeding to turn around. Haha, that was a good burn. You're so cruel, we'll be sure to get you back, the dark beauty voiced out as Gustav walked away. Gustav couldn't be bothered to answer as he kept walking away. This dark beauty began walking forward at a quick pace as she tried catching up with Gustav. Chapter 801. This dark beauty began walking forward at a quick pace as she tried catching up with Gustav. She was 59, with puffy curly hair and glamorous dark skin. Presently, her face was an epitome of beauty mixed with an expression of goofiness. She had a curvy figure and massive body assets behind and in front of her, making her shape look incredibly alluring. Her full lips, which had a mixture of pink and chocolate color, curved at the edges, depicting just how jovial she was as she ran circles around Gustav. Ada, stop following me, Gustav voiced out. I thought we were gonna spar today, she said while bouncing around the place. We sparred yesterday, Gustav reminded her. Yes, I lost. I want a rematch, Ada responded while still jumping around. You said that yesterday, and the day before, and the day before, and the day before. Gustav voiced out as his eyes dropped. Tee, it's not my fault. You didn't go easy on me, she said while raising her shoulders up shamelessly. And you're supposed to be a final year. Gustav felt like bashing his head against the tree right now. Oi, come on now, we are not all ridiculously strong like you. Besides, you still haven't defeated Greg or Anthony or Priya or Hidlner. Ada kept voicing out different names. But I have defeated you. Am good with that, Gustav said while walking forward. Meh. You defeated one of the weakest. To be a big shot, you have to defeat the strongest ones. Ada didn't even seem to mind that she was defeated by Gustav and kept tooting away shamelessly. Gustav sighed internally, knowing he'd never be able to get rid of this chatterbox unless he headed back to his room. See you later, Ada, Gustav voiced out as he arrived at the intersection on which the left led back to his room area. Wait, Gustav, you didn't show up at the simulation training center today. Did you forget that the inspectors were around? She asked before Gustav could run off. Oh, that? Nah, I didn't forget. Since I already completed all the levels of the simulation training course, there was no point in being there, Gustav voiced out with an unbothered expression. You already did? Ada's eyes widened slightly as she heard that. It would be a waste of time for me. What would I do? Spectate the others? Gustav added before resuming moving forward. But the others that have also completed it were in attendance. A gust of wind was the response Ada got after saying this because Gustav had already disappeared from the spot. Minutes later, Gustav was in his room sitting on his bed with a look of contemplation. Host attributes, name, Gustav Crimson level, 70 class, metamorphic sub-parallel being EXP, 9-235-000/27, 800, 000 HP, 52, 000/52, 000 energy, 27, 500/27, 500 attributes, strength, 305 perception, 302, mental fortitude, 306 agility, 311 speed, 307 bravery, 310 intelligence, 305 charm, 107 defense, 302 vitality, 304 endurance, 309 attributes points, 121. He was staring at the data of his current attributes. During these last 5 months, he had focused on training a lot and completed every single side quest he had received from the system, giving him a lot of boosts. The system had been providing him with different kinds of tasks daily, and even regular side quests and emergency quests, which he had to complete within the camp. It would seem most of this was done to appropriate Gustav with a lot of points and rewards so he could improve in strength even faster than before. Besides all these, Gustav had also focused on training his bloodline abilities and spent hours channeling his bloodline each day. He had even stayed days channeling his bloodline before when he was on the verge of breaking through to Echo rank. Even though he missed the camp drills for those few days of absence, he wasn't disturbed because in year 2, everyone was licensed with a few days absence to training each month. Currently, Gustav was at the second step of Echo rank, but his strength far outmatched that of an Echo rank, which always put looks of astonishment on everyone's faces. Gustav proceeded to check his skills and abilities panel. Skills and abilities: dash, level max; sprint, level max; chop, level 14; slash, level 16; God Eyes, level 11; hover, level 7; combination, level 5; super jump, level 13; strength boost, level 2; bloodline acquisition, level max; bloodline hold, level 2; bloodline transfer, level 2. Gustav's skills and abilities had about 7 panels, and he had managed to unlock the abilities in 4 panels already. There were still 3 panels left. All of the abilities and skills here were system-related, so they had to be raised level by level. The only way to do that was by consistently making use of the specific abilities or getting rewards from the system that leveled up every ability. He had never made use of some of them, but they had moved up a level because of this. Gustav was currently conflicted because he had maxed out dash and sprint levels a long time ago. His speed was still increasing due to the points he added to his speed attribute points daily, and his continuous growth in bloodline rank, which would get boosted even further whenever he activated sprint and dash. However, he didn't want this to be the limit for them, even though there was still a combination available to surpass that limit. But even with his thoughts and desires, there still had been no change in any of them even after repeated usage over the last 5 months. He even used his credits to get some information about breaking limits from the system's shop, yet the information was unable to help him with this. It cost him a lot of credits even though the information did not serve its desired purpose. Gustav had made use of it to train his other abilities, which aided in his speedy growth over the past few months. Chapter 802. Also, looking on the bright side, his Yarki was now even more powerful than before after it was unsealed. His Yarki had evolved. Not only was he able to use its initial ability on a larger scale, but even a new ability had been added to it. Gustav closed the panel after some time and checked his progress on the 5-year quests. Quests, duration, progress, 24.80/100%, duration, progress, 29. 32/100%, time elapsed, 1. 5 years. The first quest progress still hadn't changed since he got the research material from Sir Zilback in Burning Sand City. He had managed to acquire 2/4 of Sir Zil's research compilation on the disappearance of Humbad, which boosted his progress. This is proof that he was on the right path, but right now Gustav was actually trying to check his progress on becoming the most powerful mixed blood on Earth. Just how powerful is this person? I know the most powerful is either Miss Amy or the famed Jack Sherwin. Even with all my training progress, coupled with the boost of the system, I haven't even managed to reach 30% of their strength. Gustav was a bit disappointed as he saw this. In the next 6 months, only 3 years would be left for him to complete these quests, and he felt his progress was really staggering. The higher a mixed blood climbed in strength, the harder it was to get to the next level, which was what made Gustav worry the most. He could only decide to put more effort into training and hope it would be enough. Gustav hadn't forgotten the 1-year quest he was issued 6 months back. Duration, time elapsed. This was a quest he would need to plan intelligently before he could complete it. There was not nearly enough time to do so after his situation in Burning Sand City months back. He had to return to Plankton City to give Boss Danzo proper burial rites. He stayed there for about a day more, spending time in the neighborhood which had turned peaceful. He also has Angie's family. After spending some time in Plankton City, he traveled to Brehuman City to get the 2nd quarter of Sir Zil's research, which he then brought back to camp. There was no time to try and complete the 1-year quest, so he already decided he would handle it when next he was given the chance to come out of the MBO camp. He also had to make plans because he would literally be committing a criminal act in one of the most secure locations in the world. He didn't have any intention of messing things up or letting something similar to what had happened in Burning Sand City repeat itself. My next mission should be issued a month from now, Gustav thought out loud. This was his current focus as of now. The instant he was issued a mission and managed to complete it, he would embark on this research mission before the 1-year duration was up. He would only need one day to complete the mission after all, since it would be infiltration and extraction, but he had to plan longer than that so the quest could be completed without a hitch. Gustav was also itching to leave camp and test out all the new abilities he had acquired, and those he had upgraded in the real world. It had been over 5 months since he engaged in any serious combat, but he had a feeling that would be changing soon enough. Calm. He heard a knock on the door which brought him out of his reverie. Closing the system interface, Gustav moved towards the door to open it. He saw 2 boxes in front of his door, one white and the other blue. Gustav already knew whoever knocked earlier only came to deliver this, so he picked them up and moved back in. The white box was a familiar one he was already used to, but Gustav's eyebrows were furrowed as he stared at it. Even though he didn't open it, he already knew that the box was empty. Looks like no one issued a challenge this time, Gustav voiced out as he kept the box by the side. The white box was usually delivered by every month's end, and this was also where cadets of the same years would issue challenges to special class cadets for a chance to take their spot. A lot of second years had returned months back from their first mission and resumed training normally with Gustav. Most of them were normal cadets, and only a few were special class. Gustav would still occasionally get challenges from 1 or 2 persons, but now it would seem everyone from his set had accepted the fact that he was unbeatable, so nobody bothered issuing a challenge this time. Angie, Ildris, Falco, Elevera, Matilda, and the others still hadn't returned to camp yet. Gustav suspected that they were either issued a very difficult and time-consuming mission, or they were given another mission after completing their second. Either way, he was sure, all of them would most likely be returning soon before he left camp once again on his next mission. Gustav proceeded to check the blue box, which was where personalized challenges not relating to the monthly challenge were placed. 5 small round devices could be seen inside, which meant Gustav was issued personal challenges by 5 different people. He proceeded to check them one after the other, causing rays of light to shoot into the air, forming holographic projections, which passed across the challenge as well as the challenger's information. After checking through all 5 issued challenges, Gustav had a slight look of excitement on his face. Interesting. All 5 of them are final year cadets, and they seem pretty high up on the rankings, Gustav voiced out with a look of intrigue. Looks like I might be able to use more strength compared to my spars with Ada. Chapter 803. Looks like I might be able to use more strength compared to my spars with Ada, Gustav voiced out loud. He proceeded to pick yes to all of the challenges, wanting to test his strength level properly before he left the MBO camp next month. He noticed that the date of 2 of these issued challenges fell on the same day while another 2 fell on the same week, and the only earliest one was on a different week and day compared to the others. Next week, Gustav said with a contemplative expression. He didn't mind the dates being like this at all. Even if 2 fights were on the same day, Gustav still wouldn't mind battling them. This wasn't because he was being conceited or too cocky. It was because he'd been aching for a good fight. If Elevera was around, he'd have sparred with her instead. She was the only peer whose growth Gustav considered almost on par with his, and he also acknowledged her to be quite powerful. Calm. Gustav heard a knock on his door in the next instant. He heaved a low sigh as he moved towards the door. SHHHHSSHHH, the door slid towards the side, and 2 male cadets stood in front. These 2 had really powerful energy oozing from them, and one could tell instantly that they were strong. The one on the left had puffy brown hair in front of him, and the other to his right had white shoulder-length hair. The great Gustav Crimson himself, the one who sees himself to be above everyone. The one everyone is comparing to final year cadets. The one who doesn't know his place and dares to look down on even his seniors. The male with white hair voiced out with a tone of annoyance. Accept the challenge, Crimson, or maybe you don't really have the balls to fight me, the one in front of Gustav said with a condescending tone as his eyes turned into slits. He really doesn't, I already accepted, Gustav voiced out before the one on the right could complete his sentence. Wah. Bam. The door got shut in their faces as Gustav returned inside. The 2 stood there staring at each other with dumbfounded expressions for a few seconds before they finally decided to leave. Gustav shook his head as he returned to his bed area. Was there really any need for that? Gustav was disappointed that these final-year cadets thought he would refuse the challenge and even decided to come here themselves to force him to accept. It would seem they were desperate in wanting to defeat Gustav and show the whole of the MBO camp that they were still better than Gustav despite his rising popularity. For the stunt they had just tried to pull, Gustav made a decision in his mind, not only to enjoy the battle but also to humiliate them before winning. In an unknown wilderness in a part of the earth, a silver blur raced across the yellow sands as blasts rang out all across the place. Boom, boom, boom. She was fast enough to outrun all these explosions as she kept darting across the place in a zigzag fashion. This place was literally in the middle of nowhere, but battle troops could be seen scattered all over the place. Some mechanical moving weapons shot all kinds of artillery across the place as troops in MBO uniforms clashed with a group clad in black sky blue and black outfits. There were over 200 of them currently battling. Abilities were unleashed all over the place, causing blasts to ring out. The MBO troops outmatched the gang they were presently battling with, but the gang had their gigantic weapons stationed in different spots of the battlefield, which were powerful enough to go against the mixed blood officers. A lot of them had gotten injured from blasts that were powerful enough to bring down a whole mountain. The silver streak, speeding across this battlefield that seemed to be in the middle of nowhere, picked up the injured MBO officers laid across the place and kept running in the opposite direction. Thwii, a wall of sand was created behind the streak as it disappeared into the distance, escaping from the range of the battlefield. In a few moments, the streak arrived at an area with massive tents and moved towards the one in the middle. Plop. Plop, plop. The instant she dropped the 3 injured officers she had carried, a group of MBO officers in white outfits, which depicted they were the medical team, came out to treat the injured officers. Good job, Officer Angie, one of them voiced out with a nod. I'm going back to help some more, Angie voiced out before speeding off once more. Be careful, one of them voiced out, but she was already gone. Wind blasted across the place a few moments after she disappeared into the distance. On a fortress situated above a high hill surrounded by snow and ice, 2 figures covered in hairy sweater outfits could be seen standing atop the roof of this fortress. They had black helmets covering their faces as well. One of them squatted on this rooftop with both hands placed on it, while the second one stood behind, seemingly waiting. It's done. We have to leave now. The one squatting voiced out to the one behind. Let's go, he voiced out while stretching his hand forward. Skrrrwvvvv, a purplish vortex opened up, and they proceeded to jump in. Within another location where a facility in the midst of an unknown forest, a squad of MBO officers gathered around this threshold. A family of 3 was being escorted out of the facility, while 7 bulky men could be seen in restraints at a particular side of the facility. Yeah, we're done here, one of them voiced through a communication device, and 3 aircraft showed up a few seconds later. Chapter 804. The family was escorted toward one of the aircraft, and the other officers in the vicinity also moved toward one of the aircraft. Some of them had rumpled looks, and one of them especially stood out with the back of her outfit being torn. She had 3 purple pigtails and a purple head tie wrapped around her forehead. There were small injuries on her beautiful face, but she seemed fine. Her expression didn't display any form of pain as she walked toward the aircraft as well. Good job, Officer Olevera. The man who had called on the aircraft to show up voiced out to her as she arrived at the entrance of one of the aircraft. I was just doing my job, Officer Ahmed. She responded with a respectful but serious look before moving in. In another unknown city, a massive sky train with up to 20 carriages could be seen moving extremely fast as it rode on the rails floating in the sky. It was moving rather too quickly and headed towards an intersection point in the sky. Before it could make any turn, the speed caused it to fly off the railings, and it began to fall towards one of the skyscrapers in the city. Kirrrhh, screams could be heard across the place as the people in the skyscraper began to run towards the exits as quickly as their legs could take them. With the size of the train and the speed at which it was falling, it would most likely blast through the skyscraper, causing it to collapse. Fwihii, a figure suddenly blasted across the air from the ground, ascending several thousand feet in the blink of an eye. The entire train suddenly lost, color turning black and white. The figure with beautiful glowing eyes filled with a myriad of colors landed on the train in the next moment, and the train paused in midair. I just stopped it. You can continue with the chase. They'll handle things on this end. He voiced out through a communication device as he stood on the top of the first carriage. All across different parts of the world, Angie, Ildris, EE, and the others were finishing the missions they were sent on. They had also made considerable progress with their bloodlines and would be returning to camp much sooner than Gustav thought. Right now, Gustav was on his own, and it had been this way for over 5 months now. This was also how he came to know Ada, a final-year cadet who forcefully befriended him upon his return to camp. Ada's bloodline abilities were related to size manipulation, but unlike Gustav's size manipulation ability, she could manipulate the size of anything, herself and people included. It was a very powerful bloodline, but even with that, Gustav had defeated her multiple times. Right now, if Gustav willed it, he could take out almost everyone in camp, the training officers included, but he'd have to use his Yarky for that to be possible. The exceptions were people like Officer Mag, who was on the same level or close to being on the same level of strength as Miss Amy while she was sealed. Gustav also suspected Ada had a crush on him, since she would randomly appear in places where he was. He was trying to wave her off most of the time because of this and for the fact that she couldn't stop talking. She reminded him of Rhea. On this day, both of them were sparring again in a training ground area. Boom! A loud sound of collision rang out as a gigantic palm descended from the sky and landed on Gustav's figure. Hee hee, I got you now. A feminine laughter could be heard from above as Ada's small frame could be seen hundreds of feet above with her massive arm extending from her body. Grrrrhhhhh, the ground trembled immensely as the massive palm was forcefully raised. Her eyes widened as Gustav pushed her palm up with a single hand and casually flung her towards the left. Fwyi, I bang. She slammed onto the ground on the other side and ricocheted across the place. Bang, bang, bang. She slammed severally onto the ground, bouncing from place to place. Meanwhile, Gustav's figure had already moved. Whoosh, he sped towards her direction, arriving in front of her in nearly an instant as her body bounced from the ground towards the air again. He raised his right palm as he arrived in front of her, causing her eyes to widen slightly. Gustav, you wouldn't slap a girl, Ree. She hadn't even managed to complete her sentence when Gustav's palm came crashing onto her left cheek. Pa. A thunderous slap reverberated across the place as Ada was sent flying towards the side with her figure reducing back to its original size. Bang! She landed on the ground and slid several feet away before stopping. Hey, what was that for? She voiced out while standing to her feet. It's a spar, and I decided not to go easy on you like the last times, Gustav said while walking toward her. Come on, let's continue. There are still other abilities I wish to test out, he added. You were going easy on me those other times? Ada had a look of disbelief as she voiced out. All right, I forfeit, she added before Gustav could get any closer. Hey, come on, it was just starting to get fun. You put in more effort the other times, Gustav voiced out with a look of dissatisfaction. I do not wish to be tossed about like a ragdoll today, she voiced with a chuckle. You were asking to spar since and now you're running, Gustav said before turning around to leave. He looks like little Gustav is looking for who to pound, she voiced out as she ran after him. Gustav-sama, I wish to be pounded but in a different way, she said with a sneaky smile as she arrived beside him. What are you talking about? Chapter 805. Gustav-sama, I wish to be pounded but in a different way, she said with a sneaky smile as she arrived beside him. What are you talking about? Gustav voiced out in response with a confused look. Are you sure you ain't a virgin? Ada said with a burst of light laughter. Am not, Gustav responded, but with this, he knew Ada was talking about something sexually related based on her question, so she scoffed and stormed off. Hey, where are you? Before Ada could completely say anything, Gustav had disappeared from the scene. In a blink of an eye, a few hours had gone by, and Gustav had spent his time training as expected. He drifted through space within an intergalactic space simulation with a kind of metallic cord attached to his back, connected to a spacecraft. The space armor on his body was completely black with a black helmet as well. Gustav was currently holding onto a massive rocket launcher-like weapon on his shoulder as he aimed it at another spacecraft on the other side. Bloodline energy, interestingly, it can be used like this too, Gustav thought as he channeled bloodline energy into the weapon on his shoulder. Threeria, the weapon glowed a blinding red light across this dark space, causing the cadets on the other spacecraft to feel a sense of impending doom as they felt the energy building up. Gustav fired the weapon after a few more seconds, causing a massive red pillar-like blast to shoot toward the spacecraft. Boom! The side of the spacecraft blasted open due to the immense energy of destruction the blast carried. After that action was completed, Gustav moved towards the hole he had created and flew in before disconnecting the metallic cord attached to the back of his armor. Then a battle ensued between him and the cadets on this spacecraft. Minutes later, the simulation ended, and everywhere returned to a normal dark space with all the cadets scattered across the place. Some had injuries that were being taken care of at the moment. Gustav had taken his black helmet off at this moment, but was still clad in his spacecraft armor like the others. As usual, he had a lot of attention on him as the others gave him stares of astonishment. Just what kind of monster is he that he can channel so much bloodline energy without getting weak? Thoughts similar to this were running through their minds. No other cadet could channel so much bloodline energy into biological weapons that needed bloodline energy to work. They didn't know Gustav had so many bloodlines, so doing this came easy to him. He wasn't just making use of one bloodline energy, but multiple others. They had been taught a lot about how to channel their bloodline energy in the past few months, and use them for several purposes, one of which included this. Gustav liked the concept of using bloodline energy for different functions due to one interesting thing he found out. Whenever he sparred with other cadets or anyone who specifically tried to use one of the functions of bloodline energy, the moment their bloodline energy managed to make contact with him, a notification about how he had met the requirements for bloodline acquisition would appear in his line of sight. This made it easier for Gustav to steal a person's bloodline without having to touch them, but the downside was that if the mixed blood was to stop making use of their bloodline energy during extraction, the extraction would fail. Officer Mag began to give the cadets tips and point out where they had made mistakes one after the other. Gustav, you really need to take it easy on your peers, she suddenly voiced out as well. Gustav was a bit taken aback as he voiced out. You're beyond their level, which was why I put less teammates in your group, she added. Even with this action, Gustav had dominated the other team and injured more than half of them all by himself. The aim was to take over the other spacecraft after all, and he didn't play a villain in a nice way at all, not sparing any of them. It's not my fault they're weak, Gustav shrugged. The other cadets in the vicinity had their eyebrows furrowed as they heard this. Some of them felt he was being too cocky with his speech, but they knew better than to argue back since he wasn't really wrong. It wasn't that they were weak. His progress was just way faster than theirs. Well, you're not wrong, Officer Mag voiced out as she looked up at everyone with her short frame. You lots really need to try better, or maybe you're satisfied with this bloke's insult. Officer Mag also shrugged as she voiced out. The cadets had looks of annoyance as they heard this. This was obviously the effect Officer Mag was looking for, which would make them put in more effort. We're having space exploration with a real spacecraft in the next drill, Officer Mag announced. The cadets had looks of excitement as they heard this. They had done this just once, and it was brief, but from the looks of things, Officer Mag had made it look like it would be a proper space exploration this time. You should be doing this with the final year cadets instead. Officer Mag had a thoughtful gaze on her face as she said to Gustav before dismissing the cadets. Now that Gustav thought of it, he was literally in his final year as well, even though he was a second-year cadet. If he was to complete his next few missions, he might never have to come back to the MBO camp again. Walking out of the simulation room, Officer Mag reached out to Gustav. What's up, Officer Mag? Gustav asked. From the beginning till the end of next month you will be doing a special training with just the training officers alone, she voiced out. A special training? Gustav questioned in response. Chapter 806. Yes, we got an instruction from the higher-ups recently to give you some vigorous personal training exercises in preparation for your next mission, Officer Mag stated. Oh, I see, Gustav said with a look of understanding. It will also include tests in which we'd pass information of your performance to the higher-ups later on. Officer Mag explained to him. The Isher Mountains area is the location we have picked. It may still be changed depending on the types of training you'll get, Officer Mag stated. Later in the evening, Gustav was seated in his room, reminiscing about all the training he had undergone today. Since it's been over 5 months already, Gustav really couldn't find any challenge in any of the different training courses. It was like he had risen beyond everything, and the only thing he needed right now was to leave camp and complete his goals. Nothing here was really a challenge for him anymore, but he was hoping the personal training exercises he would be having with the training officers would be something. Gustav also recalled the duels he had coming up. The number 127th on the final year ranking board, Rufai Adams. Tomorrow, Gustav muttered as he recalled information on the first final year cadet he would be dueling. He also recalled that this particular cadet's bloodline was related to light. Gustav didn't really source for information on the final year cadets he would be battling, but he had heard a thing or two about the cadets at the top 200 on the rankings. Gustav's memory was so good that he would never forget anything even though he had heard that only once. At this point, the information about Gustav having upcoming battles with final year cadets had spread all across the camp. Some felt he was too cocky accepting these challenges and hoped he lost, while others were genuinely interested in seeing how it would play out. Gustav was, after all, known as the fastest rising MBO cadet in all of history, even currently surpassing Miss Amy's speed. Miss Amy was already beyond Gustav's current bloodline rank at the time she was a second year, but she got into MBO camp when she was already at a rank higher than Gilbert, unlike Gustav. Also, Miss Amy had been going through vigorous training since her childhood days, unlike Gustav, who just started about 2 years ago. Not everyone knew this information, but those who did were still astonished as to how Gustav was pulling this off. Gustav didn't care for the debate going on all across camp about the upcoming duels. Whether or not he was on the level of the final year cadets, he wouldn't back down. None of the final year cadets had gone beyond Echo rank as well. The highest was still said to be a peak Echo rank, and Gustav was currently at the second step. Some final year cadets were even below the second step, and some hadn't even achieved Echo rank yet, so it was normal that Gustav was being compared to them all this time. After all, most of his second-year peers still hadn't even achieved the Falcon rank. This was one of the reasons it was too much for them when he was grouped against some of them in training sessions. Gustav decided to channel his bloodline in the meantime, since his first battle would occur the next day. He was a little excited and hoping he'd be able to use more strength. Hours into channeling his bloodline, Gustav suddenly opened his eyes as he sensed something. Fwaihayi, his perception spread across the building, towards the surrounding buildings, and then across the entire residential area. He could sense a strange outburst of bloodline energies. A smirk appeared on his face as he moved towards his room door and opened it. At the exact same time he did so, a vortex opened up right in front of his door with 2 people walking out of it. "You guys," Gustav voiced out as he stared at the 2 who had just arrived. One was a dark-skinned, handsome-looking male with afro-styled hair and a 6-foot-tall frame. The other was a beautiful-looking male with a height of at least 72 with silver-colored long hair that reached his lower back, and his eyes just happened to be closed. "We're back," Eldris and E voiced out at the same time. "Took you guys long enough," Gustav voiced out while exchanging fist bumps and secret handshakes with EE and Eldris. They moved into Gustav's room together while laughing. "You guys look a bit different. Must have been one hell of a mission," Gustav voiced out while scrutinizing the both of them. Eldris had gotten taller and his presence even stronger, while EE's hair had become even bushier than before. His presence was calm and refined, which depicted a kind of progress. "Oh, my missions were nothing grand, but they were quite interesting. I got to try a lot of things out," Eldris stated. "You're one to talk. Look at you, and it's only been 5 months," E said while scrutinizing Gustav's long, dirty blonde hair from behind. "You've decided to grow out your hair?" Eldris asked. "Haha, no. I'll definitely cut it back to its initial look before I leave here for my next mission. I'm just leaving it be for now," Gustav responded. "It really doesn't look bad this way," Eldris voiced out. "I kind of dig the look too. Braiding it wouldn't be bad as well, hee and adding a bit of makeup. I'm sure the guys would love you," E stated from the side with a burst of sketchy laughter. "Hey, what the hell? Haha, Gustav elbowed E from the side as he burst into laughter. Gustav proceeded to ask about the others as well, and when they'd be returning. And Eldris said they made contact with everyone before returning, and they'd probably all be arriving back in camp this week. Gustav was glad to hear this. Everyone seemed to have completed their missions just fine, without accidents. Chapter 807. Gustav was glad to hear this. Everyone seemed to have completed their missions just fine, without accidents. Gustav spent almost the entire night chatting with and Eldris as they spoke on a variety of things, their mission included. It would seem their time outside MBO camp had been nothing short of interesting, filled with many events like his. And Eldris also claimed that their time in the MBO camp had been shortened, so they would only be here for a year more. Gustav was glad to hear this as well, knowing they would be able to join him for missions in the future earlier than intended. Gustav planned to reach a height in the MBO where he'd be able to pick the teammates he went on missions with. This would also make it easier to go on system-related missions and complete the 5 years quest since he would have people around him that he trusted. He hoped the others performed well in their missions so they'd have their time in the MBO shortened. Oh yeah, Vera is returning with Glade. I don't know what all that is about, but they seemed close the last time we had a group call. Glade was in the frame with her the whole time. E voiced out with a suspicious expression. She mentioned you knew about it, which was why we couldn't really question her, Eldris stated. Yes, all that is to my knowledge. Glade is going to remain a part of our circle, Gustav responded with a slight grin. What? Eldris and E voiced out at the same time with looks of confusion. I'll let you guys in on something when they return. There's nothing to worry about, Gustav assured them. And Eldris noticed Gustav's expression and felt he was up to something. Knowing how smart Gustav was, they decided not to be worried even though they were intrigued. After having snacks and chatting for a few more minutes, Eldris and E finally decided to head to their rooms. While at the door, Gustav recalled something and voiced out. I'm having a duel tomorrow. At the passageway, Eldris and E paused in their tracks and turned around to look back. Well, who's the unlucky soul? E asked. It's a final year cadet, Gustav responded. A final year cadet? Eldris stated with a surprised tone. You're fighting final year cadets now? E also wasn't expecting this answer. He was thinking it was going to be one of the second-year cadets. They issued challenges. Maybe you'll finally be able to use a higher portion of my strength now, Gustav said with a slightly excited look. Well, I'll be damned. You really gotta bring us to speed on everything that has happened while we were away, E stated with an intrigued expression. Well, tomorrow is certainly going to be interesting. It would be nice watching you fight again, so we know how much catching up we have to do, Eldris voiced out before turning to keep heading towards his room. See you tomorrow, Gus. E also waved from up ahead the corridor as he headed towards his room. Gustav smiled and nodded before turning around to head back into his room. Just afterward, a figure arrived at the beginning of the corridor from the elevator. He was clad in a hairy brown sweater as he walked down the corridor. He paused for an instant in front of Gustav's door and turned to stare at it with an inexplicable expression before resuming his walk towards the end of the corridor. The next day arrived, and Gustav moved out to start his usual routines. Eldris and E were back, so they had joined in the new morning routine for the second-year cadets. Unlike the last year's routine, where their bloodlines had to be sealed, this time, everyone would be strapped with weight vests based on the amount of strength their bloodlines gave them and asked to scale through several obstacles in a tweaked gravitational environment. Eldris and EE's return had already sparked discussions all across the second-year cadets. Eldris was still known as the third most powerful, while he was known as the fifth. Their return had the cadets speculating about the return of the other top-ranking second-year cadets like Alevera. However, both of them didn't seem to be the only ones that had returned. Another special class cadet who had not been around performed spectacularly in the new daily routine, finishing around the same time with EE and Eldris. Indrik is back as well? Damn, he looks like he has gotten really stronger. Two monstrous brothers. I guess it makes sense. The cadets were astonished when they saw Indrik at the finish area chatting with one of the training officers. Indrik had grown a little taller, and his curly black hair seemed to have reduced in size, but his face was looking more mature than before. Gustav was a bit surprised to see that Indrik had returned as well. Eldris and E watched his reaction, but it would seem Gustav didn't really hold a grudge against Indrik anymore. Indrik came over to their side to greet E and Eldris, who seemed to also be okay with his presence after everything that had gone down with Angie in the past. Gustav was a bit surprised to see Eldris and E chatting casually with Indrik like the wall between them had thinned a little. He wouldn't be concerned, but this was something that was missing in the past, so he figured something must have happened during his absence. Gustav was still unaware of the whole situation with Angie and how Indrik had proven himself to have truly changed. Go speak with him, E whispered while tapping Indrik's back. But what if? Indrik was indecisive as he stuttered. Don't worry, just do it. A simple greeting would suffice, Eldris whispered as well, like he was rooting for Indrik. Chapter 808. Indrik finally decided to do man up and move towards Gustav's position. Gustav, good to see you again. I hope you're doing fine. Indrik finally uttered these words, but the atmosphere turned very awkward. What is this supposed to be? Gustav voiced out as his eyes dropped. Just got back yesterday too, so I decided to come say hi. Indrik laughed wryly as he tried to tone down the awkward atmosphere. E and Eldris felt like facepalming from behind. Well, I can't say I share the sentiment. Just try to stay out of trouble, kid. Gustav sounded neither welcoming nor dismissive as he voiced out. It was like he was in between with his response. I have a match to attend to, Gustav stated before leaving. Eldris and E followed from behind. E tapped Indrik's back twice as they arrived beside him. It wasn't completely disastrous, but you can do better next time, he whispered before walking faster to catch up with Gustav. Indrik stood in place for a while, with a wry smile plastered on his face. He exudes the presence of the outworldly. He is the one we've been looking for. A voice resounded in the very depths of Indrik's mind, causing his face to undergo a brief display of astonishment. Are you sure? Indrik asked again just for confirmation. There is no doubt about it. If you had my abilities, you would be able to sense it too. The presence gives off a powerful energy of fate. It feels choking, the voice replied. Then, I have to find a way to speak to him, Indrik said internally. He recalled that a few moments ago, Gustav mentioned having a match. Indrik didn't know what that was all about, so he decided to head in the direction Gustav left in. How do you think the duel will end? Gustav is clearly overestimating himself. These are final-year cadets. Hey, did you hear? The final-year cadet Gustav is going against Rufai Adams, who once battled a group of Halads and managed to hold out his own till backup arrived. Wow, that's awesome. But I'm sure Gustav's feats don't pale in comparison, escaping an entire group of MBO officers, and some of them happen to be Kilo-ranked. From the discussions and debates Indrik heard all over the place, he figured that Gustav was battling against a final-year cadet. This also came as a surprise to him, as he thought Gustav would be fighting a peer. I would like to witness his prowess. The voice of the gym once more resounded in Indrik's mind. Me too. I'm sure he has improved a lot during these past months. It's been 11 months since I last set my eyes on him, Indrik responded internally. Everyone was headed towards the location of the duel at this point. In an icy area, pointy iced rocks could be seen positioned in different corners. The ground was rock solid even though it was all ice. It felt like a train could land on the ice, and it wouldn't even manage to make a dent. In the center of this icy vicinity, Gustav stood several 10 feet away from a cadet with brown skin and multicolored glowing hair. This was kind of similar to Eldris' eyes, which had all the colors practically in the world within. But instead, this cadet had it on his hair, and it glowed brightly. He was literally like a standing beacon of lights. This cadet was Rufai Michael, who Gustav would be facing today, and this was their battle location. A training officer who was going to supervise the duel was standing in their middle, stating the rules of the match. The cadets who had come to witness this were standing a considerable distance away from the two. The training officer moved away from there a few seconds later, and a massive barrier was formed around the battle area. It was necessary to create a strong barrier since these were two Echo-ranked mixed bloods going against each other. The strength scale of Echo-ranked mixed bloods was quite high that even the government forbade public fights or an overly display of strength since they were capable of causing destruction on a large scale. Begin. The training officer voiced out after the barrier had been erected. Gustav, finally, we meet. It's an honor to battle you, Rufai Adams voiced out respectfully as he took a stance. Oh, I guess he's not like the others who were looking to humiliate me with this. Gustav was a bit taken aback by the respectfulness. It turned out Rufai just wanted to battle with Gustav out of intrigue. Please, do not hold back against me. Rufai smiled as he charged forward. H&M, I want. Gustav nodded as he also charged forward. Both of them clashed in nearly an instant, causing shockwaves to spread from the point of impact. Boom! The strong icy ground cracked and blasted into chunks that scattered across the place as Rufai was pushed back by over 100 feet. He did a flip in midair as his figure was sent flying backward before landing several hundred feet away and sliding backward. He hadn't expected Gustav's strength to be so colossal without even channeling his bloodline. He had barely stabilized himself when Gustav appeared in his front, once more with his right fist flying towards his face. Trinrin Rufface's hair glowed brighter than before as spectrums of light appeared in front of Gustav, blinding his view. Bang! He felt his fist slammed into a solid frame, but he knew it wasn't a person. As the brightness died down, he noticed he punched a solidified glass frame that seemed to have come out of nowhere. Rufai had appeared at his back at this moment with both his palms glowing with intensity as he swung them towards Gustav's back. Rays of light looking like lasers and disco parties appeared all across the place, encompassing Gustav from all directions. Chapter 809. Rays of light looking like lasers and disco parties appeared all across the place, encompassing Gustav. Skreeked Sl, the lights tore lines across the icy ground, even cutting through an icy mountain up ahead. Gustav spun around at this point with his hands glowing a milky-colored light. Atomic manipulation has been activated. Thuum, a milky-colored starfish-shaped light, burst forth from Gustav's palm. The tentacles part of the starfish-shaped milky light surrounded Gustav's frame as it grew massive instantly. The lights that were initially about to make contact with him touched the glowing milky-colored light and instantly disappeared. Huh, my lights. They just got snuffed out? Rufai was unable to understand what had just happened as he stared at the massive milky energy in front. The lights were usually able to cut through everything, but upon contact with what Gustav had just conjured, everything disappeared. Fwihai Gustav made the star-shaped glow spread out, becoming larger in size and disintegrating everything in its path. Rufai jumped backward as quickly as he could the moment his palm made contact with the milky-colored energy, and he felt all the light covering it disappear. He felt a part of his foreskin was gone already, and even just the small contact his clothes made with the milky-colored energy, a big part of it had disappeared. Gustav had to deactivate the power and jumped back, landing on an icy mountain several hundred feet back. Cracks spread from where they were situated earlier as the hole in the middle extended in radius. Rufai had managed to get away as well, but this power had terrified him. There was now a massive hole in the icy ground. The ice on the ground extended as deep as 1,000 feet since it was man-made. Usually, it was so strong that breaking through the surface would require a lot of strength, and right now, the massive hole left within it was so deep that the water underneath could be seen. Rufai and Gustav stared in each other's direction from over 1,000 feet away, standing on the icy mountains opposite each other. I don't have to get into close quarters with him before attacking, Rufai voiced out as his spectrum glowing hair floated in midair. Three balls of light began to appear in the air around him. Bang, 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 bang. A very thin line of laser lights that were not visible to the naked eyes suddenly shot out in multiple numbers. He can't counter if he can't see it. A grin appeared on Rufface's face as he said internally. Gustav's tilted his head slightly to the left with speed, to his surprise and everyone's astonishment. Everyone that didn't understand why he would perform such action was left bewildered. They came to understand the reason for this a moment later as a massive blast occurred behind the icy mountain Gustav was standing on. Boom! A part of the ice caved in, Some of the spectators still didn't understand where the attack had come from until Gustav started swerving across the place. Boom, 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 boom. More blasts rang out as different icy areas on the ground caved in from the effect. Dash, is he dodging an invisible attack? Dash, the attacks must be taking the form of lights that are invisible to the naked eyes. Some people from the crowd of spectators could figure it out as they watched. They were bewildered that Gustav could dodge them so casually like they were visible. How is he dodging them? Rufai could not believe his eyes as his hands waved about, conjuring more lights around him. He was aware that Gustav was amongst the fastest mixed bloods in camp, but even the fastest person in the world would be unable to dodge something invisible, or so he thought. He raised his hand, causing more lights to appear, and clasped his hands together. All the light merged into one massive one, shining a blinding spectrum of light across the area. Thuum, in the next instant, it suddenly shot out a massive pillar of light in Gustav's direction. An atomic blade appeared in Gustav's hand at this point as the beam arrived in front of him in an instant. Gustav swung it out at full force, causing the part of the light that was supposed to hit him to disappear. Boom! The residual energy slammed heavily into the mountains, causing them to crack as they began to collapse. Gustav knew this was his cue to move and leaped off the collapsing icy mountain towards the one by the side. Another beam shot out once more towards the one he had just arrived at. Gustav finally decided to try out an improved ability. Gravitational displacement has been activated. A burst of gravitational energy spread forth from his being, warping the gravitational force in the area. Foom, the massive pillar of light, suddenly paused in midair as Gustav raised his hand. Swiping his hand to the side, it slammed into the icy mountain area he had just leaped from. Energy discharge has been activated. Now to mix the two up, Gustav thought as he stretched his palm forward. Boom! A massive surge of red energy blasted out from his figure, spreading in every direction. The 3,000 feet tall icy mountain he was currently standing on blasted into smithereens, sending chunks of ice in every direction as the energy spread outwards. Rufface's eyes widened as he created a cluster of lights to surround him. He was also able to turn light in the environment into solid objects, so he instantly created lots of light barriers around himself. However, boom! The instant the energy hit, everything in the vicinity was ruptured. The barrier of light he surrounded himself with got blasted apart as the energy slammed into him as well, sending him flying. The spectators had looks of awe as everything within the barrier was blasted into pieces the moment the energy surge hit, turning the whole vicinity into a world of dew. Chapter 8:10. The spectators were about to relax, thinking the energy surge would be unable to affect the barrier when, bang! The barrier surrounding the battleground blasted into smithereens the moment the red energy made contact, causing everyone in the vicinity to try and take cover as the whole place quaked violently. The training instructors in the vicinity quickly swept into action, creating multiple layers of barriers to stop the surging energy. It took many seconds before things calmed in the vicinity. As the dew from the smashed ice began to disappear slowly, what could be seen in front was no longer a battlefield. Except for a few pieces of ice protruding from the water 1,000 feet below, nothing else could be found around here. Gustav could be seen floating in midair as the red glow around him slowly died down. Oh, I guess it was too much, Gustav thought as he looked at the destruction he had caused. Rufai was somewhere on the east side of the former ice battlefield with injuries all over his body. He looked up at Gustav in the air with an astonished gaze like he was staring at a deity. He still had it within him to battle since the number of injuries he had sustained was nothing for an Echo-ranked mixed blood, but he was satisfied with their clash. Gustav slowly turned around in midair and stared down in his direction. "Shall we continue?" he asked with a loud tone. The spectators outside the battle area that had managed to stabilize themselves had looks of bewilderment on their faces as they stared at Gustav. Who would continue the battle after witnessing such a thing? Even we who were far away feel traumatized by the power displayed. I wonder how the poor guy feels. Most of them had thoughts similar to this in their minds as they heard Gustav's words. They felt the final year cadet might be brave enough to keep fighting since he didn't seem that injured. But from what Gustav had displayed since the start of the battle, It was obvious that Gustav had the upper hand. I forfeit, Rufai said with a smile while giving Gustav a thumbs up. It was nice having this duel with you, he added. Likewise, Gustav responded as his body began to descend. At the very least, I was able to see the extent of my abilities to a certain level. Gustav had been reluctant to try out some of these moves against regular mixed bloods since he was troubled he might kill someone by mistake. Gustav landed a few feet outside the icy battlefield area, which was no longer a place for dueling in the meantime till they repaired the damage. He had made use of hover, which had increased to a level where he was capable of floating in midair for up to 30 seconds. This practically gave him flight ability for half a minute. Man, you were damn awesome, he voiced out while slapping Gustav across the shoulders repeatedly. Already Echo rank? Eldris asked. It's been like a month now. Gustav nodded as he recalled. The reason he achieved the second step so fast was that he made use of the rewards he received from completing the Jabal mission. Wow, we have a lot of catching up to do, Eldris voiced out with a look of excitement. Both EE and Eldris had already achieved the Falcon rank some time back, but they hadn't expected that Gustav would have moved to a whole rank higher already. Their improvement speed was monstrous to others, but Gustav's speed was monstrous to them, which had them wondering how others saw his speed. You better show us a trick or two, he voiced out as he wrapped his arm around Gustav's shoulder and began pulling him away from the scene with Eldris. Gustav-sama, I knew you were going to win, someone suddenly shouted out from behind, causing EE and Eldris to turn around. Bam! A figure jumped on Gustav's back, causing his eyes to drop. This troublesome girl again, Gustav said internally. EE and Eldris moved to the side and scrutinized this dark-skinned beautiful girl with intrigued expressions. Gustav tried to shake her off, but she kept holding onto his head as she wrapped her legs around his belly region. Are you another Angie contender? E voiced out, causing Eldris to slap him at the back of his head. E showed a look of injustice like he was just saying his mind and there was nothing wrong. Oh, are these your friends you told me about? Ada voiced out as she jumped off Gustav's back. Nice to meet you. I'm Ada, a final-year cadet, she said while introducing herself. A final-year cadet? Gustav, you've gone that far? You're dead for sure when Angie returns, E voiced out while shaking his head in pity. What are you talking about? Gustav's eyes dropped even more as he voiced out. Ha 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 ha, I like this one, Ada voiced out after hearing E speak. Eldris introduced himself as well, and the group of four began to head out of the vicinity while chatting with one another. In a far corner of the spectators' area, two familiar figures stared in Gustav's direction with troubled looks. He's quite powerful, one of them voiced out. Yes, I wasn't expecting this as well, but we cannot back down, the other one responded. Who said anything about backing down? Rufai is a fool for letting him have the win, the first one voiced out again before leaving the scene with his partner. The spectators dispersed, and the entire camp was given something to talk about again. It instantly spread across the camp of how Gustav had managed to defeat a final-year cadet in the top 200 rankings. With this, it was now assured that Gustav was truly comparable and stronger than a lot of final-year cadets. Gustav's spar with Ada hadn't been public, so they had no idea how much he had been trashing a final-year cadet earlier on. Chapter 811. Gustav's spar with Ada hadn't been public, so they had no idea how much he had been trashing a final-year cadet earlier on. While Gustav and the others were heading back to their residence, Indrik suddenly came out of nowhere, appearing in front of Gustav. Gustav, we need to talk, he stated with a serious look. EE and Eldris were surprised to see Indrik looking quite assertive compared to earlier. Ada had a confounded look on her face as she stared at Indrik, who had just popped out of nowhere. Why do both of them have facial similarities? She wondered as she noticed the resemblance between Gustav and Indrik. Talk about what? Gustav asked. Can we discuss in private? It's important, Indrik voiced out again. One of Gustav's eyebrows was raised as he stared at Indrik with a suspicious gaze. He wondered what Indrik would want to talk about that both of them would have to be alone before he could speak. About what? Gustav asked again, seemingly uninterested in giving Indrik a chance without him at least revealing something. I can't say anything about it here, Could you please just come with me? Indrik asked politely. And Eldris stared at Gustav from the side, wondering how he would respond. They actually wanted him to give Indrik a chance, but they knew it wasn't their place to say anything about this, so they just kept quiet. All right, now or later? Gustav asked. Now if that's okay with you. The matter is of great importance, so I don't want to delay, Indrik voiced out. Just as Gustav was about to give his answer, a notification popped up in his line of sight. Emergency quest. Keep distance from Indrik? Huh? Gustav couldn't hide his look of confusion as he spotted this emergency quest. Rewards, +1 000 EXP, +50 attribute points, punishment for failure. What the hell is this? Gustav wondered internally with a look of confusion. Quest initiates in 5, 4, 3. So what do you say? Indrik voiced out after seeing Gustav remain silent for a while. The others, too, were wondering why he had been silent all this time. 2. I'll have to go for now. I gotta take care of something, Gustav voiced out before zooming off. Swoosh 1. The group stared at each other, wondering why Gustav had just taken off like that without saying anything more. Maybe he forgot something important. You'll have to ask him another time, Indrik, voiced out with a comforting tone. I will do that. Thank you, Indrik voiced out before walking away. You don't share much of a relationship with the outworldly, do you? The voice of the gem in his head resounded once more. We have a history. I don't think he'll ever forgive me for the things I've done, Indrik responded internally while sighing. I mean, I don't deserve to be forgiven, but I hope he gives me the chance to help him at the very least. I see. This is indeed troubling. The voice resounded in Indrik's mind once more. I sense uncanny similarities. Who is he to you? The voice asked. He is my big brother, Indrik responded. Meanwhile, and Eldris decided to head over to Gustav's room to ask him why he stormed off. Ada chatted with him for some time before heading back to her residence. At the moment, Gustav was in his room questioning the system. What's up with this quest? Gustav asked with a tone of suspiciousness. What's up with it? Why are you suddenly concerned when you don't like your little brother? The system responded. Yes, I don't care about him. But why do I suddenly quest to stay away when he had something important to talk to me about? Gustav questioned with a face full of suspicion. It's just randomly generated. It's no big deal. You don't have to look for an explanation over every small detail or situation. The girl voice of the system sounded dismissive. Sure, but this one was just too much of a coincidence, don't you think? I'm not so stupid as to not find it suspicious. Gustav wasn't backing down on this as he felt there was more to the quest than met the eye. You find everything suspicious, Gustav. Even your closest of friends. Loosen your guard a little, the system stated. Nah, this is weird. I was already staying away from him before, but why you gotta force me to do it now? Gustav said while clicking his tongue. You're overthinking this. I don't know what the punishments for failure are, but I don't care. I will be failing this mission, Gustav voiced out as he stood to his feet. I'm going to hear what Indrik has to say, he said while moving towards the door. At this same moment, knocks were heard on the door. Gustav didn't have to open it before he knew who was at his door, or rather who were. He moved to open it, and as well as Eldris, walked in. Yo, Gustav, why did you storm off like that? Voiced out the moment he sat on the sofa. You could have at least given Indrik a time you would speak with him, or tell him you're not going to speak with him at all. Eldris voiced out with an explanatory tone. Oh yeah, about that. I really had something to do, but I'll go talk to him now, Gustav voiced out in response. You will? Both Eldris and questioned at the same time with surprising tones. Yeah, Gustav replied affirmatively. They had thought Gustav really didn't want to speak with Indrik, which was the reason for his sudden departure. We'll go look for him now, Gustav said while heading towards the door. And Eldris both stood up, ready to leave as well, when Gustav paused before he arrived at the door. Don't do it, the system voiced out in his head. I will. I don't care about the consequences. I need to understand what's going on, Gustav replied with a strong tone internally. Chapter 8:12. Just as he wanted to take a step forward again, the system spoke. Okay, I'll tell you why the quest was issued. The system finally caved in. Gustav finally paused all initial thoughts of leaving and stood in place before responding, "I'm listening. I issued that quest because I sensed a strange and mystical presence from Indrik," the system revealed. "I have never sensed such a presence before. It gives off a complex aura and hard-to-read energy. It also was definitely absent the last time you saw Indrik before leaving camp almost a year back," the system added. "What? You're sensing a strange presence from him, and you didn't even think to let me know?" Gustav said with a tone of disappointment internally. "I wanted to scan and properly investigate this presence before saying anything," the system answered. "And you have to do that while I'm staying away from him?" Gustav asked. "I feel it's safer for you to stay away as we don't know what he's up to this time," the system responded. "It's impossible for him to harm me. It's better to even be in closer proximity so inspection can be done better," Gustav stated internally. "Have you forgotten what happened with Vera? Do you wish for something similar to happen again?" The system said with a reminiscing tone. Vera had managed to input her parasitic strains in Gustav without his knowledge, and he would have turned into a puppet had the system not figured it out way later, or Vera didn't confess and freed him herself. The system was trying to tell Gustav that what if something similar to that happened again? "That's why I need you to stay away till I can figure out what exactly is going on," the system added. "I ask again, can you scan and investigate Indrik from anywhere within camp?" Gustav asked. "Yes, you don't need to be in close proximity with him," the system responded. "Still, I doubt he can do anything to me if I don't make contact with him." Gustav still had a dubious look on his face as he responded. "Just stay away for now. When I figure something out, I'll let you in on it," the system stated once more. Gustav finally decided to give in even though he still felt suspicious, like the system was hiding something from him. "Gustav," he voiced out from behind after seeing that he had been standing in place for several seconds. "I changed my mind," Gustav stated before turning around to go sit. "Why?" Ildris asked. "I just don't want to see him." Gustav shrugged like it was no big deal as he voiced out. "You just said." He was about to remind him about a while ago. "I know what I said, just leave it be." Gustav cut him off before he could complete his sentence. And Adries had suspicious expressions after hearing that, but they decided to let it slide. They felt maybe Gustav was up to something again, or he had figured something out. They could only hope that he would give his little brother a chance one of these days. But then they were also suspicious about Indrik asking to discuss something important out of the blue. This made them believe the discussion might not be related to their present inexistent relationship. The trio later had lunch and headed for their next drill. Since and Eldris were just returning, Gustav had to take them to the new locations where they trained. He was practically their tour guide for the day, taking them to the different locations where the training classes were now situated. Just like that, a few more days went by, and all through this time, Gustav had been avoiding Indrik just as the system said he should. It wasn't stated how long this quest was going to be, but Gustav was hoping it wouldn't take too long since he was interested in hearing what Indrik had to say. He also didn't like getting kept in the dark about something that had caught his interest, but for now, he decided to leave it up to the system even though he was still feeling suspicious. During this time, Alevera, Falco, Ria, and Timi had returned to camp. Their return as well had caused waves of rumors to be spread across camp as cadets made different kinds of speculations that they had probably received accolades and would spend lesser time in camp. It was no secret at this time that Gustav was already a full-fledged officer even though he was still in training. Some even knew that Gustav had been promoted in rank several times. Gustav was even promoted in rank twice after the Burning Sand City ordeal, so he was currently nearing the rank of even the instructors in camp and was currently above some of the normal MBO guards here. Everyone felt something similar might have happened with the others as well. Alevera's return especially caused waves across camp as everyone figured out that she was at the peak of Falcon rank already. Only her speed of improvement came close to Gustav's. She was the only one besides Gustav who had achieved the same level of strength as some of the final years. Even Gustav considered her speed of improvement as monstrous, considering he had the system and multiple other bloodlines, a rank at his disposal. Alevera didn't have such a boost, yet she was not completely lagging behind. From the moment she returned, Alevera already challenged Gustav. She was interested in sparring with him to measure her improvement and see if she was coming close or Gustav was leaving a higher gap in power between both of them. Why hasn't Angie returned? Gustav asked Falco, who was currently in his room with the others. They said there was a minute delay to take care of. Don't worry, give it 1 or 2 days, they'll arrive soon, Falco assured. They? Gustav voiced out while raising one eyebrow. She's returning together with Matilda, Vera, and Glade, Falco revealed. Oh, I see, Gustav responded with a nod. Chapter 8:13. Why is Glade still a part of our circle? She betrayed you. Falco finally asked the question that had been bugging him. I have plans for her. Don't worry, you guys will understand soon enough, Gustav responded dismissively. Falco was about to speak again when his eyes darkened and black tattoos appeared on his face. This one is a big softie. I would have sliced her into pieces myself, Dark Falco voiced out. That's why you lost against me in the past, even though I was weakened. You're all bronze and no brains, Gustav responded with a snicker. I demand a rematch. Dark Falco voiced out with a tone of anguish. Shut it. Gustav knows what he's doing. Falco suddenly regained control and voiced out. The dark tattoos on his face disappeared as well. He could feel Dark Falco struggling to regain control back out of dissatisfaction with what Gustav had said. But Falco knew well enough that the battle would end in a matter of seconds if he gave Dark Falco the chance to battle with Gustav. Sorry about that, Falco said to Gustav due to the sudden outburst of Dark Falco. It's fine, Gustav replied with an unbothered look. You seem to be missing Angie, Eldris voiced out from the side. I guess, Gustav said with an indecisive tone. It's to be expected, hee-hee, you guys are new couples after all, E stated with a light chuckle. Hey, now don't forget to always use protection unless you want to have a little Gustav, Timmy added. A little Gustav? Gustav raised one of his eyebrows as he voiced out. He means you should make sure to use protection if you don't want to get Angie pregnant, Eldris explained. What? Pregnant? No, I am not ready to be a father, Gustav stated with a tone of disagreement. Then make sure you use protection when you two are doing the do, or better still you could inject yourself with a wiper, so your sperm cells remain inactive for 24 hours, which will prevent pregnancy, Timmy voiced out once more. Gustav had a contemplative look, recalling that he didn't make use of protection last time he and Angie had S**X. What if I impregnated her? Gustav wondered internally. Don't worry, you didn't. I took care of it, the system replied. You did? Gustav questioned internally with a confounded look. Yes, it's fine, the system confirmed. How exactly did you take care of it? Gustav said with an intrigued tone. The details are not important, but you could say I made you impotent for a brief period of time. The system chuckled as it spoke. Gustav. It made me impotent? Gustav had forgotten that the system lived inside him and witnessed every one of his experiences. He now realized just how creepy it was to have a third party watching when he and Angie were busy engaging in bedroom activities. But on the bright side, he wouldn't need to use any protection since the system could always take care of it. He felt relieved knowing he didn't have to worry about whether Angie was currently pregnant or not. It would be a disaster to become a father at such a young age. The others kept advising Gustav on this topic, and Timmy was especially knowledgeable on this aspect as he kept giving Gustav different methods to make use of. You seem to have too much knowledge on this, Falco voiced out from the side with a suspicious look. Yeah, you know way too much, E added. Speaking from experience? Eldris chipped in as well. Asterisk cough cough asterisk, what are you guys talking about? I'm still a virgin, Timmy voiced out while trying to adopt an innocent look. Cap, I call bullshit. That didn't sound very convincing, E, Falco, and Eldris voiced out at the same time. Timmy is speaking from experience, Rhea voiced out from the side. Hey, idiot, what are you saying? Timmy yelled out, trying to get Rhea to shut up. Looks like he is, E nodded as he spoke. Falco and Eldris also nodded as they gave Timmy a knowing look. Why are y'all looking at me like that? Timmy voiced out. You should teach us your ways, we barely have any girls. Well, I and Falco don't, but Eldris is literally a chick magnet. He just doesn't want to capitalize on that, E voiced out while rubbing his palms together. E was saying this, not knowing that he was seen as one of the most attractive males in camp. The reason he didn't notice this was he only had eyes for one girl, and the girl didn't seem to have eyes for anyone. What ways? Am a virgin? Y'all should be asking Gustav. He's the one with an harem, Timmy said while passing the mantle over to Gustav. Yes, Lord Gustav, teach us your ways, Falco voiced out jokingly while bowing on the floor. EE held onto Timmy while Falco held onto Gustav, asking them to give tips. You guys. Later during the night, everyone was headed back to their rooms. Oh, before I forget, Gustav, you're having another duel in the next few days, right? Falco asked. Yeah, and another one just 2 days after this upcoming one, Gustav answered. Falco, Rhea, and Timmy had missed the first battle Gustav heard, and they had heard cadets speaking about it all across camp. From the way it was being spoken about, they were sure they had missed an interesting scene. They didn't want to miss the next one since everyone in their circle was looking up to Gustav as their leader. They always wanted to know just how far he had gone and use him as a beacon of motivation to train better and push themselves to grow even stronger, faster. After all was said and done, everyone headed to their rooms. The special training starts tomorrow, Gustav recalled as he sat on his bed. He decided to spend the entire night channeling his bloodline. Chapter 8:14. The next day arrived, and Gustav didn't join the others in the morning routine. He headed towards the training location within the MBO camp called Isher Mountains. After a few minutes of racing across campgrounds, Gustav arrived at a desolate mountain area. These mountain regions were quite different from normal mountain regions. It was thousands of feet high up and surrounded by a body of water. Not only was the mountain region moving, but occasional weather occurrences would also trouble the area. Getting to this location was cumbersome for normal cadets, so it was a test for Gustav to get here without any assistance. To their surprise, it didn't even take him minutes to arrive here. The mountainous area covered a radius of more than 400,000 feet. It was practically like an island, but then it extended high up into the clouds, so scaling it was an issue for most. The mountainous area and solid part from top to bottom was a shade of black. Although it was a little dark up since it was very high in the clouds, this wasn't the reason for its blackness. This mountainous area was just different from the usual mountains, and it was obvious that this was also man-made. Gustav had run across the body of water surrounding the massive mountainous area. Then he sped up from the bottom to the top, managing to avoid all the complex weather situations trying to hinder him from rising. The moment he arrived on the western side of the area, he met one of the instructors. Instructor Cora, Gustav voiced out as he saw the bulky instructor with brown braids up ahead. This was the same instructor who taught Angie how to properly make use of her speed and deal with the highest forms of damage. Follow me, he said to Gustav and turned around. Gustav walked with him. They passed through the middle of several mountains that were side by side and tried to avoid areas where lightning would occasionally come crashing down. In some areas, heavy tornadoes with lightning swimming in between could be seen, and some areas just had intense wind. The Isher Mountains were so large that they even had a small stream located in the southern part. No vegetative area could be seen, but some places had grasses growing out, and even large mountains had some form of caves. Gustav and instructor Cora arrived somewhere at the epicenter of this massive training area. For other training officers could be seen standing in place, waiting for their arrival. Officer Mag, the instructor in charge of damage control, the main instructor in charge of mech usage, and lastly, the instructor in charge of technological weapons usage. It would seem these 5 were going to be in charge of this special training for Gustav. Before anything, your first task is to run around Isher Mountains 7 times, not missing any region, Officer Mag voiced out upon arrival. THSSHHH, the instructor in charge of damage control who had a bare head and human figure, Officer Cole, stabbed a rod into the ground which had some readings on them. This will calculate your speed and let us know each time you complete a lap, Officer Cole voiced out. Time limit? Gustav asked. There is no time limit, just move at your highest speed, he said. My highest speed? Gustav voiced out while holding his jaw. Yes, we need to calculate your current speed with the difficulties of having to scale through some areas, he added. Gustav was reluctant to use his full speed in any situation because he didn't want people to know how fast he really was. Besides, Making use of his fastest speed would be when he took the ultimate combination form, because then he'd be able to fly. Oh wait, you can fly, right? Officer Mag asked while recalling Gustav's most recent battle. No one knew Gustav had any flight-related ability before this until after the destruction of the whole battle area where he was seen floating in midair. Not really. My flight ability is limited, so I'd rather run, Gustav answered rather truthfully. Although, he knew the whole task would end very quickly if he was to make use of the ultimate combination and fly now. Considering combination was now way stronger than before, and he had more energy points to spare now, Gustav decided he would just combine dash and sprint instead. Are you ready? Officer Mag asked. H&M, Gustav responded with a nod. Combination has been activated. Sprint plus dash. He could feel his body getting extremely light as he activated this. Go. The moment Officer Mag gave the go-ahead, Gustav charged forward with immense speed. Thwoom, a white streak, cut through the air as he disappeared into the distance in an instant. Fwoosh, the officers covered their eyes as dust and wind were stirred across the place due to the immense speed. A reading appeared on the pole displaying Gustav's current speed as he ran across the Isher Mountains. He moving at a speed 1,000 times faster than sound. Officer Cole voiced out with a surprised look. The other officers, too, were awe-stricken, considering this was a speed that even some kilo-ranked mixed-bloods were unable to currently attain. Before they had even recovered from their astonished state, Gustav had managed to complete a lap in a matter of a few seconds. Currently, Gustav was running across another mountain region where lightning bolts were slamming against the ground at every given second. Gustav, already knowing the pattern after running past here, just once managed to evade the lightning bolts despite not being as fast. Boom, boom, boom. An electric field created from the multiple lightning bolts began to pull Gustav from every direction, but before this could even faze him, Thwoosh, he had already raced past this region, traveling at a speed that was nearly ripping the ground open as he left after images in his wake. 3. It's only been 20 seconds. The instructors were shocked as the readings depicted that Gustav had already completed 3 laps. Chapter 8:15. It was like these areas with different effects were unable to suppress Gustav's speed. Gustav arrived at another region where tornadoes moved about the place. The speed of the tornado looked a bit slow from his point of view. Leaping towards one of the tornadoes, Gustav arched his arm backwards to the limit. His muscles bulged immensely as he traveled across the air towards the 55,000 feet tall tornado. His figure was like an ant compared to this massive tornado, but Gustav was unbothered as he threw his fist forward with force. Power boost has been activated, boom. His fist thrust forward with an insane amount of power, sending a strong force that cleared out the entire tornado in the blink of an eye. The tornado was ripped open as he blasted through, clearing this part of the mountainous area. Clarity instantly returned to this area, but the moment Gustav landed back on the ground, his figure had disappeared from the scene. The more laps he covered, the faster he was because he had cleared the situations in some of these areas, giving him easier access. 8. Officer Cole voiced out as Gustav arrived back in the same spot he started. Fwum, a burst of wind spread across the vicinity as he suddenly paused and slid a few feet forward. 47 seconds. Officer Cole voiced out with a tone of astonishment. How is it that he got even faster with each lap completed? The instructors seemed to have noticed this too. Officer Mag, who had her sense spread across the entire Isher Mountains, could sense that some areas had fewer irregularities than before, which had her wondering how Gustav was able to clear some of them. Good. This is your current data. At the end of this training session, you will retake this test, and you must beat this score, Officer Mag stated. Gustav now understood what this was about. Unfortunately, they didn't know that he could beat this score right now if he wanted to, but Gustav decided that since this was how he started it, this was how he was going to end it. Right. Noted, Gustav answered. Officer Mag made it known that there would be other tests besides this for today to access different stats about him, and he would have to beat all these stats at the end of the training. The special training would run till he had his next mission, which would be by the end of this new month. They stated that this place was more strong enough to handle Gustav going all out without getting destroyed. The last battle Gustav engaged in had been taken into account since it was known that if he decided to unleash some types of abilities, it would take a toll on the surroundings. The Isher Mountains would be able to handle the damage from his abilities. In a flash, a few more days went by, and Gustav had spent this time in isolated training with the 5 instructors. They would capitalize on the usage of his strength and how he could compress the way he unleashed abilities sometimes to suit certain situations. Officer Mag was mostly in charge of that aspect. The weapons training inspector focused on teaching Gustav how to use a technological weapon to the best of its capacity. Gustav showed him the Jiko Hakai katana he owned, and the instructor taught him a trick to wielding it at high input without having to suffer a severe backlash from it. Of course, this had to cost Gustav an arm several times, but his healing factor kicked in, and he would regain his entire arm in a matter of minutes. He would only have to use recovery medicines if he wanted to recover in a few seconds. The training officer that dealt with Mech taught Gustav how to channel his bloodline energy in the smallest quantity and use it as fuel to power a mech without running out of power fast. Instructor Cora focused on teaching Gustav combat tricks he had picked up over the years. Gustav was amongst the best in combat training originally, so he didn't have to stress in teaching Gustav what he knew. He also realized that there was nothing much to teach Gustav, considering he already knew a whole lot, courtesy of Miss Amy. The special training did not hinder Gustav from having free time, but his free time was a little more limited than before. Through this, he was mostly able to avoid Indrik. However, Indrik seemed to have noticed Gustav was avoiding him. After all, up to a week had gone by since he told Gustav he had something important to discuss with him. Anytime he came close to Gustav anywhere, Gustav would suddenly vanish from his line of sight. This was becoming troubling as he didn't know the step to take so he'd be able to talk to his brother. "Do you think he's aware of what is coming?" Indrik asked internally. "There is a chance that he does. If he doesn't, we have to bring him up to speed." The voice of the gem replied in his head. "Now how do we do that? He won't even let me see him," Indrik said internally with a sigh. "Use the people close to him to get to him," the gem suggested. Indrik was about to say something again when he spotted some figures in the distance. He was currently walking around camp, but he could see these figures coming from the area that led to the MBO camp hall of arrival and departure. "Angie?" he muttered as he spotted Angie amongst the group of 4 girls in the distance. He could see they were dressed in actual MBO uniforms instead of the cadet outfits, which meant they were just returning to camp. These 4 figures were Angie, Matilda, Vera, and Glade. They were currently headed in the direction that led to the special classes residential area. Indrik decided to use this as an opportunity to head to Gustav's room and tell him that Angie had arrived before anyone else would. Chapter 8:16. Indrik decided to use this as an opportunity to head to Gustav's room and tell him that Angie had arrived before anyone else would. He began moving towards the residential area. He had initially tried to see Gustav by going directly to his room, but whenever he knocked on Gustav's room door, Gustav would act like he wasn't in, and sometimes he actually wasn't in due to the new special training that had just begun. Indrik was hoping to find him indoors this time, and if knocking didn't attract Gustav's attention, he would mention Angie's return. In a few minutes, he arrived at their residential building and moved straight to the floor where all of their rooms were situated. The instant he arrived on that particular floor, Gustav, Eldris, and Falco could be seen heading towards the elevator area. "You sure?" "Haha, of course, I crossed level 34 today." They were engaged in a conversation as they walked across the corridor area. The instant Indrik's figure was spotted, Gustav had begun getting notifications from the system. Close proximity between host and Indrik will result in quest failure. Host is required to maintain distance in 10-9. A countdown started in his line of sight as Indrik was spotted walking towards them. "All right, guys, I gotta go," Gustav suddenly voiced out as he prepared to dash away. The others were confused after they heard this. Gustav was supposed to follow them to a training center, but now he suddenly voiced out that he had to go. Now they truly believed that Gustav was avoiding injury, seeing as he just decided to suddenly cancel on them the moment Indrik's presence was spotted. Just as Gustav dashed forward, Indrik spoke. Angie is back, he voiced out with a loud tone. Gustav, who had already arrived in front of the elevator, paused in his steps the moment he heard that. What? He voiced out while turning around to face Indrik, disregarding the timer of the system. I just saw her, and what are the others' names? Indrik said while holding his chin. Ma, Matilda, Vera and Glade. He added. Where? Gustav asked. Hey Gustav, you have to get away from him now, or you'll fail the quest, the system voiced out in his head, but Gustav ignored it. 3, 2, follow me, they'll show you, Indrik said while turning around. At this point, Gustav remembered the countdown and, at the last second, zoomed towards the railing area of the corridor before jumping off. Thumb 1. His body traveled across mid-air, crossing over 1,000 feet in nearly an instant. At this point, the timer stopped since he had given Indrik a lot of distance. Everyone stood in place with confounded looks on their faces, wondering why Gustav just did that. They had thought he would at least follow Indrik to find out where Angie was. Females could not go into males' residences without permits, so it made sense that Angie wouldn't be able to come here unless she saw one of them, which might not be till the next day since it was currently late in the evening. It didn't make sense that Gustav would not follow Indrik to look for her, unless he didn't want to see her till the next day. They began walking towards Indrik to ask him to take them to where he had spotted Angie, but Indrik suddenly leaped across the air while pushing his palms forward. Flyyi, he began flying in the direction Gustav headed in. After landing several thousand feet away, Gustav saw that the quest was still on and frowned his face in inconvenience. This isn't. Just as he was about to say something, a figure could be seen traveling in mid-air in his direction. I know you're avoiding me, big brother. At least listen to what I have to say, Indrik voiced out with a loud tone as he flew across the air with speed towards Gustav's position. Swoosh, seeing the timer began again, Gustav sped forward with speed, giving Indrik a lot of gaps. Indrik, seeing as Gustav wouldn't give him a chance, decided to start a pursuit. Chapter 8:17. I only ask for 5 minutes of your time. I promise I will not waste it, Indrik yelled out in response from far behind as he flew speedily. He didn't blink at the moment since it cost a lot of energy, but he was hoping Gustav would listen to him now. No, stop pursuing, Gustav yelled out. I can't do that. This is a matter of grave importance and... Before he could finish his sentence, Gustav made use of combination. Sprint plus dash. His speed suddenly increased multiple times as he blasted forward across a mountain region with immense speed. The rest of Indrik's words got lost in the wind since Gustav had left a great deal of distance between them to the point where even from Indrik's current height in the sky, Gustav had almost completely disappeared from sight in an instant. I apologize in advance for this, brother. Indrik had finally had enough as he decided to make use of one of his powerful bloodline abilities. Waving his hand in a circular format as he flew across the air, a bluish circle appeared in front of him. Space disruption. Worlds merge, he said internally as his eyes glowed a bright blue color. Zoom Trurowoyan, a burst of blue light, suddenly blasted outwards like shockwaves from his figure, spreading across the vicinity. Gustav, who had already disappeared from view, felt powerful energy from behind and turned to the side while still running forward. The instant he looked behind, his eyes widened as the blue energy coming from behind made contact with him and everything in the vicinity. Despite his speed, he was unable to outrun this. Before Gustav knew what was happening, he found himself in an unknown space. He was genuinely astonished as he found himself standing in this space atop an invisible plane amidst galaxies of stars and constellations. Planets could be seen in the distance as well. This unknown space was nothing short of beautiful. However, he could also see plants, trees, and stones floating around the vicinity, which seemed weird because Gustav recognized some of these trees to be from camp since he passed them while speeding away from Indrik. At the other end of the invisible plane, Indrik could be seen standing in place with his eyes closed. He suddenly opened his eyes and stared in Gustav's direction. What is this? Gustav asked. Sorry, big brother. I forcefully dragged you into a space that exists in between reality and illusion. I created this world, Indrik voiced out. What? You created this? Gustav asked with a surprised tone. Yes, I did. I can not only control the movement of things, but also tamper with space. Indrik explained. Oh shit, the timer, Gustav thought as he stared at the notification in front of him. To his surprise, he noticed that the timer was not counting down. 10. It had been at 10 the whole time. What is going on? Does this place exist in something like a different dimension of space and time? Gustav asked with a suspicious look. Yes, the concept of the normal world space and time is irrelevant here. This world belongs to me, so I make the rules, Indrik voiced out. Gustav now understood why the timer couldn't count down. So he couldn't even fail the quest even though he was in close proximity with Indrik right now. He was astonished that Indrik could use such an ability, and he could drag anyone or anything he wanted into this place. It was way too powerful for someone who was only Falcon-ranked mixed blood. Get away from here now, Gustav. Break out of his little world, the system voiced in his head. It would seem that even though time was irrelevant, the system still worked perfectly. How do you expect me to get out of here? I mean, I could if I tried hard enough, but I don't want to, Gustav responded. What? What do you mean by you don't want to? Gustav ignored the system and stared at Indrik. What do you want? Gustav asked. I just need to tell you about something important, Indrik responded. I can't explain in details here because I can't keep this world in transition with the real world for long, but this concerns the fate of the Earth as well as the universe itself, and you are right in the middle of it, Indrik stated. The fate of the world? Gustav voiced out with a tone of disbelief. Yes, the fate of the world, Indrik responded. There are many powerful people that can prevent anything bad from happening. I'm sure it doesn't have to be me, Gustav responded. The existence of everything is at stake in the future because something is coming, and you're at the epicenter of it all, Indrik voiced out once more. Something that puts all of existence at stake is coming. Gustav was about to argue more on this when he recalled a past conversation. Besides, if you cannot complete these quests, you have no hope of taking on what is to come, which will eventually lead to death, so failure leads to death either way. Is it related to what the system has been preparing me for? Gustav wondered internally. He recalled the system's statement when the 5-year quests were revealed. I will tell you more in detail in the real world. I can't keep this up any longer, Indrik voiced out before waving his hand in a circular motion. Through Ruyan, a burst of blue light flashed across the place, and Gustav found himself back in camp in the next instant. Hey, system, what aren't you telling me? Gustav asked internally. There was no response from the system. If this is related to what you've been preparing me for, why did you make me stay away from Indrik? Gustav asked once more. It is not time for you to know the full details yet, the system responded. So it is related, and you decided to trick me, so I wouldn't get any information. Gustav was finally coming to this realization. Stay away from Indrik, the system demanded. Nah, since you want say anything, you'll find out everything I need to know from Indrik, Gustav voiced out as he began to walk towards Indrik, who was approaching him from up ahead. Chapter 818. Nah, since you want say anything, you'll find out everything I need to know from Indrik, Gustav voiced out as he began to walk towards Indrik, who was approaching him from up ahead. The timer began to count again, but Gustav ignored it this time. Now that he had found out that the system was purposely keeping information from him and using this quest to keep him from finding out certain truths, Gustav didn't care about the consequences anymore. He had decided he was going to listen. 3, 2. He arrived in front of Indrik, and both of them stared at each other for some time while the timer was still counting down. At 1, 0. Emergency quest failed. Stay away from Indrik. Punishment shall now be revealed. Gustav totally ignored the notifications and spoke to Indrik. Tell me what all this is about, he voiced out. I think he might be able to explain better, Indrik responded. He? Who? Gustav voiced out with a confused tone. Indrik raised his left palm slightly, and a glowing green gemstone appeared above it. Greetings. Outworldly. A deep voice laced with mysticism was heard coming from the green gemstone. What is that? Gustav asked with a slight look of bewilderment. Not what but whom, the voice corrected. You can call me Husarius. I am a collective knowledge and power of the people of the forgotten city of Abedum. We existed numerous centuries ago, but my people sacrificed themselves for the preservation of the earth, leaving me with power, knowledge, and premonitions all relating to the future state of the universe and how to prevent the havoc that shall reign upon this place hundreds of years to come. This knowledge also included the one who will be at the epicenter of it all. The outworldly, a being whose origin is not of the earth, neither is it of any other planet in the universe. A being destined to either enforce the what is to come, resulting in either paramount destruction of all or prevention of the world's destruction. The outworldly is you. The voice coming from the gemstone stopped at this point, letting Gustav process everything he had just said. Origin is not of Earth? You can't be talking about me since I was born here. You're clearly mistaken, Gustav voiced out, but internally he felt this Husarius could be referring to the system. It is impossible for me to be mistaken. I have seen it, and I can sense the energy of the outworldly within you. While you may have been born here, it doesn't mean your origin is of Earth. The cosmos works in ways that no one understands, Husarius stated. What exactly is this thing that you're talking about that is coming? Gustav was more interested in this. That is, just as Husarius was about to speak, Gustav's eyes glowed red immensely. True and rays of light burst forth from his eyes. Quiet old man. A girly voice was heard as the rays of light shooting out of Gustav's eyes transformed into the figure of a beautiful young girl. It was a petite 12-year-old looking girl with an extremely cute face and big bangs on her head. She was clad in a red gown, and her eyes looked quite mean as she appeared in place. It was a physical simulation of the system that looked no different from a human standing in place. Hey, when did you learn how to do that? And why did you come out? Gustav asked with a surprised look. Indrik, too, had an astonished look as he stared at this cute-looking girl, wondering who she was. You were not listening to me, so I had to appear. And this thing was about to spill things it isn't supposed to say, the system voiced out while reaching to grab the gem. Indrik moved it away and stared at her with a suspicious look. What are you doing? Stop, since you clearly don't want to tell me anything. Husarius will bring me up to speed about what you are, Gustav voiced out as well before turning to face the gem. Well, as you can see, I'm not the outworldly. You were probably talking about her because she is not from Earth and she has been traveling for over 500 years across space before getting here. Gustav finally decided to reveal this to clear things up as he already felt the Husarius was referring to the system. No, Husarius voiced out. No, Gustav said with a confused tone. This creature here is a helper. It will assist you in protecting the universe in the future, but it has its own goals as well. I can see that it has been tainted with the energy of the outworldly. A good plot to achieving its own goals as well, Husarius voiced out. Shut up, the system stated. What is Husarius talking about? Gustav questioned. You are the outworldly, Gustav. This being is not, but it is helpful to a certain extent while also being a leech. Your brother has told me tales of your past, which frankly is something I cannot understand, as you should have been immensely powerful from birth, being the outworldly. A strange force that I currently cannot comprehend has tampered with your existence, leading to you living half of your life pathetic and weak. Husarius voiced out. What do you mean? Gustav was finding it hard to believe everything he was hearing right now. The boon, the force of the cosmos within you was tampered with, and even right now it doesn't seem to have restored itself. But I can sense from the energy you give off, it will be restored soon enough. The only problem is, it has to be restored before the impending doom arrives, or the odds of coming out victorious would be greatly reduced, Husarius explained. So you're saying, I was supposed to be powerful from the very beginning, but someone or something tampered with that which made me need the system. Gustav voiced out with a look of disbelief. Yes, you are the outworldly. You may not believe in fate, but you are indeed a fated one. Husarius added. Chapter 8:19. Hey, old man, you've said enough. The system voiced out as it finally spread out a wave of energy it had been accumulating this whole time. The red waves that spread about the place covered up the gem, preventing it from giving off light. "Stop it," Gustav voiced out. "It is not time for you to learn of everything yet. This thing will ruin everything," the system stated. "Unfortunately, I cannot trust you anymore. You seem to already know of all these, but you kept it from me. Stop what you're doing right now," Gustav voiced out with a commanding tone. "I am not here to harm you, Gustav. If I wanted to do that, I already would. I live inside you, remember? Besides, if I harm you, I'll also harm myself, so think, why would I want to do that?" The system said with a logical tone. "Then tell me your goals," Gustav demanded. "I can't reveal them yet," the system responded. "Not because I don't want to, but because of programming protocols installed into my core," the system added before Gustav could misunderstand. "A lot of things that I have kept hidden. Protocols are keeping me from revealing unless you complete some tasks first or grow to a particular level," the system explained even more. "All right, since you can't do the revelation, then let Huseruis do it. He's not bound by any protocol. Set him free," Gustav stated. Just as the system was about to respond to that, a bright light burst forth from the gemstone. Triuin, it pushed back the red energy that had surrounded everywhere. "I am the combination of hundreds of thousands of souls sacrificed for the greater good of the universe. Your power may be great, but sealing me is impossible," Huseruis voiced out the moment it freed itself from the system's hold. "You." The system looked annoyed as it noticed it couldn't seal Huseruis anymore. "Gustav deserves to know and understand what he is up against. So let me take the role of revealing the rest to him since you are not allowed to do so," Huseruis voiced out. "But let me clear something up. Gustav, there is no reason to mistrust this being. It truly doesn't harbor any negative plans against you, but I believe choosing to withhold information might affect the odds, so I have chosen to impart you with knowledge on what is coming," Huseruis stated. "You have revealed enough. Any more will have cause and effect. It is not really a sensible choice," the system said to Huseruis. "He needs to be capable before the time arrives, and this will help," Huseruis voiced out. "I am already putting him on that path, and he will be capable enough when the time comes if he follows my plans," the system stated. "How will that even happen if he is not well equipped with information right now?" Huseruis kept disagreeing with the system's method of doing things. "You claim to have a plethora of knowledge, and yet you can't see that this is the better choice. I know who you are now. Consult the fates and see what I'm talking about. You will ruin things if everything gets revealed to him right now. There is just too much at stake," the system voiced out. "You know about the fates? Very well. I shall consult them once more," Huseruis voiced out before he stopped talking. "You two seem to have forgotten that I'm right here. Who gave you two the right to make decisions for me?" Gustav voiced out while furrowing his eyebrows. "I want to know everything," he voiced out. "Not yet, Gustav. It will tamper with what is to come," the system voiced out. "Huseruis revealed a lot to me. I don't think letting Gustav know is a bad idea, especially when he's the outworldly." Indrik finally chipped in after staying quiet all this time. "It is precisely because he is the outworldly that he needs to know less for now. You are not directly involved, so it's fine if you do," the system responded to Indrik. "How does that even make any sense?" Gustav voiced out with a look of annoyance. "I am a time candidate. I am directly involved too," Indrik stated. "What is that?" Gustav was looking even more confused the more this situation lingered on. "I know what you are, Indrik. You're just a helper like me. You're still not directly involved," the system replied. Just as Gustav wanted to speak again, the green gem glowed in a rhythmic manner like a beating heart. "I will have to agree with this being. The wheels of fate will be affected if everything was to be revealed to the outworldly right now. How did I miss this?" Huseruis spoke with a worried tone. "Why exactly does information for me need to be kept from me?" Gustav asked with an irritated tone. "Two reasons. 1. You're connected to it. The more you know, the faster it brings about what is coming. 2. The strange force that tampered with your existence will show up the moment you find out about it. You're not powerful enough to fight it off as you are now, so you will get devoured, which would spell the end of everything," Huseruis explained. "Right now some information has to be delayed till you reach certain levels of strength," Huseruis added. If you already know about these 2 reasons, why didn't you just tell me this before? Gustav asked the system. I couldn't. The protocols keep me from revealing even those, the system responded. But not to worry, Gustav. Some parts can still be revealed without causing any of these problems, Fusaruus voiced out as it began floating towards Gustav's head. You deserve to know at least this much. The instant it finished this sentence, it flew into Gustav's forehead, phasing right through. Endrik and the system watched as Gustav entered into a trance-like state, while his eyes also glowed green light. A moment after this happened, a loud voice was heard from behind. Gustav. It was a familiar feminine voice. Chapter 820. A moment after this happened, a loud voice was heard from behind. Gustav. It was a familiar feminine voice. Endrik's eyes widened slightly as he turned around, while the human-looking simulation of the system disappeared back into Gustav. It's Angie, he said internally the moment he spotted the feminine figure coming from up ahead. Angie wasn't the only one approaching. Matilda, Vera, Eldris, and practically the whole gang were headed in this direction. Angie looked excited as she moved forward. On her beautiful face, a newfound maturity that was initially absent months before leaving camp could be seen. Besides that, it looked like Angie had grown taller and bustier, and her legs, especially her calves and thighs, were now looking thicker. Matilda had a silvery colored on her forehead, a feature that wasn't present initially, and Glade was looking a bit more muscular than before. Vera was the only person without a noticeable change. She still had a clueless and innocent look, but Gustav knew well that she was far from being like this, and her other side would come out the moment it was time to get into action. Huh. Endrik, Angie voiced out as she came closer. She was unable to tell that Endrik was the person standing besides Gustav initially. Why is Gustav in this state? She asked the moment she arrived in front of them. Gustav was still standing in place with a green glow in his eyes. Everyone else arrived in front of them, too, with the same question in mind. It's kinda hard to explain. You all will just have to wait. Endrik couldn't think of a good reason to give them, and he obviously couldn't tell them anything about what had happened here. What did you do to him? Angie's voice smile suddenly switched to a cold glare as she asked. I didn't do anything to him. We were just having a civil discussion. He'll explain to you guys when he's finished, Endrik said while raising his hands up in resignation. Angie turned to the side to stare at Gustav again and called out his name twice, but upon seeing no response, she turned to face Endrik again. What did you do? She said while moving toward him with a murderous glare. Yo, chill, Angie, he voiced out as he quickly stepped in the middle of both of them. You know very well it's impossible for Gustav to be defeated by anyone here. Let's just wait for a bit, he added as quick as he could, trying to quell Angie's irritation. You're right. Let's just wait then. For your sake, I hope you haven't harmed him in any way, she voiced out with a threatening tone while still glaring at Endrik. Endrik sighed as he folded his arms. It will take forever to get them to trust me, he said internally. He wasn't really complaining since he felt it was his fault, but he was hoping Angie would at least give him the benefit of the doubt without jumping at his throat at every given opportunity. Where did all that nice character go? He wondered internally. In the next 2 minutes, Gustav's eyes regained clarity, and he looked around to see everyone standing around. He had already sensed their presence earlier, but due to his brain getting flooded by tons of information for the past 3 minutes, he was unable to engage in any physical activity. It was like the gym could also sense the arrival of new people, so it didn't phase out of Gustav the moment it was done. Gustav, Angie yelled out as she jumped into his embrace, wrapping her arms around his neck. Gustav grabbed her, holding her perky butt up as they embraced each other. Angie, feeling the gaze of everyone around, quickly jumped off Gustav as she realized what she had just done. Her face turned red as she looked down. Guys, why are y'all looking at us like that? Gustav asked. Get a room, you two, voiced out. Gustav welcomed the girls that were just arriving as they moved towards a secluded training booth within the MBO to chat as a group. Besides Alevera, everyone else was here, Endrik included. He initially wanted to leave and come back, but he got pulled by and the other guys to follow them. Gustav didn't mind, knowing he and Indrik still had unfinished business. What exactly was going on over there? Angie asked about what she had witnessed the moment she arrived with the others. Indrik was passing some private information to me. It was a lot of information, so yes, I needed time to process them. Gustav responded with part of the truth while leaving out the rest. What information? Falco asked. We'll let you guys in on it when the time is right, Gustav responded. I myself don't have a lot to go on right now, he added with a serious look. The others could tell that whatever the situation was, Gustav was also trying to figure it out due to his serious expression. They knew it was impossible to pry information out of Gustav unless he wanted to tell them, so they had to stop asking here. I hope you figure it out, Glade voiced out, causing everyone to stare at her. She froze in place as she saw all the eyes on her. Why is she even here? Matilda voiced out with an irritated expression. Yeah, I also want to know what's happening, Angie voiced out while staring at Vera and Gustav. Oh yeah, about this. You guys will have to take Glade as a part of our circle like before, Gustav responded. What? Why? Angie, Matilda, and Falco asked at the same time. Simply because. She is now an ally incapable of betraying me anymore, Gustav stated. All of them had confused looks as they heard this, and were about to retort in various ways when Gustav spoke once more. Code IR. The instant Gustav voiced this out, Glade's eyes suddenly turned listless. Chapter 8:21. Her head hung low for a few seconds before she raised it again with a poker-faced expression. She stood to her feet and walked toward Gustav before kneeling in front of him. What are your orders, master? Glade questioned with a loyal expression. Everyone's eyes widened as they witnessed this. What is she doing? Angie voiced out loud. In response to that, Gustav replied, Glade. Punch yourself hard in the face till your eye socket is on the verge of popping out, he voiced out, causing all their eyes to widen again. As you wish, Glade responded and proceeded to start punching herself in the face. Bang, 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 bang. Blood oozed down her nose, and in no time, her entire face was smeared in blood, but she kept punching like she was immune to the pain. Gustav, how is this happening? Ildris asked with a shocked look. The details are not important, he said while turning to the side to smile at Vera. Vera's face turned a shade of red as she noticed Gustav's stare, even though it was just meant to be like a compliment for her doing a good job. All you guys need to know is, she is now incapable of betrayal, Gustav voiced out once more. Meanwhile, Glade was still hitting herself in the face with a look of determination. Some of them gulped down saliva as they thought, if Gustav can turn her into this, doesn't that mean he can turn anyone into this? They had no idea that Vera was responsible for this since Gustav didn't reveal it, but they felt this would most likely happen to anyone who messes up in the future. I think you should release her now. This is becoming too much. Falco was the first to chicken out upon seeing this. He voiced out his thought, which was an absolute contrast to his alter ego. Yeah, just cool it, Gus. This is already enough. E seemed to share in the sentimentality. Nah, Gustav responded. I'm already being merciful enough by deciding not to kill her off. The price she has to pay for living is forever being under my control and endless commands of self-torture. Gustav responded with a merciless tone while staring at Glade, who was still kneeling in front of him. Bang, 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 bang. Her fist was bloodied, and her face was already disfigured at this time. But there was no single shred of remorse on Gustav's face as he watched her continue to brutally torture herself. Hours later, Gustav was back in his room as it was already late at night. He and Angie had shared some alone time in his room some minutes earlier and engaged in some passionate kissing session. They almost ripped each other's clothes off here, but cadets were not allowed to have S*X while in camp. They would be figured out if they went beyond the point of kissing. The entire night had been spent talking about everyone's experiences during their time outside the camp. Everyone had interesting experiences, and some of them had even witnessed death close up. Especially Angie, who was practically sent to a battlefield for her second mission. Gustav could see the innocence she used to have on her face was slowly starting to fade away. It was unknown if she had killed yet, but Gustav could tell that she definitely would not be as indecisive as she used to be when faced with a precarious situation involving death. Gustav was glad that everyone was back now, but he would be leaving in around 3 weeks' time, so he had limited time to spend with them. The issue of Glade had been handled just as he wanted it to be. Close to 6 months ago, he had made Vera input her parasitic strain within Glade. When Glade recovered from Angie's beatdown, she was still herself, but she was devastated by the situation that had occurred with everyone figuring out that she had betrayed Gustav. Glade was reluctant to resume and get a new mission, but at the same time, she was on tenterhooks, whether or not to reveal that she had been compromised to the person in the shadows. After thinking about the pros and cons for over a week, she decided to reveal that she had been compromised, but just then, the parasitic strain Vera inputted in her kicked in. Her consciousness was eaten up and replaced by the new parasites, which mimicked her character and retained her memories with one difference. She became Vera's puppet so Vera could now control her actions and perceive her thoughts. Vera, of course, stopped her from revealing that she had been compromised and decided to do what Gustav instructed her to. Placing a set of codes within her consciousness would trigger her to respond to Gustav's voice and completely obey his every command the moment he mentioned those codes. Gustav was back in camp when all this was happening, so today was the first time he was testing it out, but it worked perfectly. Now his plan was to make use of Glade to uncover who this mystery person was and feed them with wrong information about himself. Glade was going to become his tool, and he made a decision to deal with whoever was behind the scenes. Now that everyone had gone back to their rooms and Gustav was all alone again, it was now time to ponder on everything that had happened today and reflect on all the information that Huseruis had passed to him. I am the outworldly. This doesn't make any sense. Gustav mumbled with a contemplative gaze. He recalled how his life had gone from the start before the system came along. He was the definition of weak and pathetic in every aspect, mental state included. He especially recalled only being able to change his hair color contrary to how he was supposed to be, according to Huseruis. The system was practically a blessing to him, but then Huseruis had told him it was a leech. Gustav was still in disbelief as to everything that had been revealed so far, but he knew well enough that everything was true because even the system had confirmed it. Chapter 8:22. Gustav was still in disbelief as to everything that had been revealed so far, but he knew well enough that everything was true because even the system had confirmed it. Just as Huseruis had said, there were reasons why all could not be revealed to him, so he only got a little knowledge about what an outworldly was supposed to be and a small peek as to how it was related to what was to come. So far, he knew, some unknown calamity had been predestined to bring chaos and destruction all across the universe. He was in the epicenter of it all because he was supposed to be equipped with the strength to stop it or, better still, whether or not he had the strength to, without his input, it could spell the end of everything. Indrik happened to have been chosen as a time candidate who is going to retrieve 4 items scattered all across different galaxies, which will provide assistance to Gustav. Apparently, his friends were also included as it was also revealed that everyone close to Gustav would have to join him in the final days of the happenings. Gustav only caught a small glimpse into whatever was supposed to be responsible for all this, and he felt the very depths of his soul tremble. Huseruis had revealed to him that he even handled it better than Indrik, adding that Indrik passed out for over 24 hours after getting doused with some information. This is bigger than I thought, Gustav mumbled. That is why I have all these goals and quests for you. Everything is connected, the system stated. You held information from me, but I understand. Although it's still a bit confusing, I feel the powerful beings of this age should be able to put up some type of fight, so why does it have to be me? Gustav voiced out. It's just how it has to be, Gustav. You clearly do not believe in fate, but just because you don't believe in something doesn't make it inexistent. It's either you or everything ends. The system added. I am no savior, Gustav voiced out, but then he recalled all of his friends. One by one, images of their faces began to appear in his mind, and then came Angie's and then Miss Amy. These were people he didn't want gone. Lastly, Gustav pictured Boss Danzo's face and how he'd have said something along the lines of, I'm not asking you to be a hero, You'd die a quick death if you decided to try and carry all of the world's problems on your back. But if you have the power to prevent pain and suffering, don't hold back your hand, because if you do, you're no different from the scums of the earth. Help according to your capacity, but don't turn a blind eye if you know you can prevent bad things from occurring. He could really hear Boss Danzo's voice clearly in his head, like he was still alive and sitting right next to him. "I'm willing to give this a try," Gustav said with a newfound zeal. The system had already given a hint in the past about this, so it wasn't all new to him, but he never expected the situation's intensity to be on this scale. According to Husarus, there's still around 4 to 5 years left before anything happens, but if I uncover more about what is to come, the duration will be shortened, and I might not get the chance to reach full potential before then. Does this mean I have to proceed in darkness for now, not having any information about the enemy? Gustav voiced out in a worried tone. Gustav considered knowledge to be power. He felt most of his wins came from the simple fact that he was knowledgeable enough, which gave him the opportunity to come up with the best solutions to certain situations. Not knowing what he needed to know about this felt extremely disadvantageous. After all, a person with all the intelligence in the world will not be able to apply such intelligence when there is lack of knowledge. Your brother Indrik knows more about it. He will have your back, the system stated. Even with all this, I still can't bring myself to fully trust him. Whether or not he has changed, I will still keep an eye out for him, Gustav voiced out. You have no choice but to trust him here. I and Husarus linked conscious for a few, and I came to understand what a time candidate is. He is incapable of betraying you, so there's nothing to worry about, the system assured Gustav once more. They'll focus on finishing the 5-year quest you issued first. You both have made it clear that I have better chances when I become the most powerful mixed blood on Earth. I have 3 more years to complete that, Gustav said while holding onto his jaw area. And Planet Humbad must have some kind of connection with this, since I have to find it. Gustav just knew that things would be revealed step by step, and he had to complete these 5-year quests first, which were in accordance with what is to come. What worried him the most at the moment was that the closer he got to uncovering all this, the closer the approach of the predestined date of doom. In a flash, the night went by, and Gustav was having his second challenge battle with one of the final years today. 2 days after, he would be having the third, and the fourth came a week after that. The two who had set the battle dates to be just 2 days away from each other were also the two who had approached Gustav's room over a week prior. Gustav felt they were close friends and could tell this was planned to humiliate him. It would seem the third match was planned just 2 days after, so the humiliation from the second match would not have died down before the next loss arrived. Chapter 8:23. Gustav was not even bothered by this. He still wasn't satisfied with how his match ended with Rufai. He and Rufai had become cool with each other and would share greetings whenever they bumped into each other due to how their match went. However, Gustav wasn't satisfied since he didn't get to use more of his abilities. Now that he would be battling cadets who had some grudge against him, Gustav was sure the match wouldn't be forfeited so quickly. He would get the opportunity to use more. Also, these two were considerably higher in the final year rankings, so Gustav was sure the battle would be more interesting. After 4 hours of training with the instructors, the time of the battle arrived, and Gustav was given permission to leave the Isher Mountains to attend to his duel. The battle location this time was somewhere Gustav had trained before. It wasn't new to the final year and second year cadets. The Devil Canyon. They decided to use such a crazy location as the venue of their battle. Someone could get struck by lightning at any given moment. Even we have to stay far away, or might get caught up in one of the blasts. Some of the cadets chatted on their way to the venue. Having challenges was a normal occurrence in camp, but it was rare to see final year cadets issue challenges. It made the cadets even more interested when Gustav was involved. In the last duel, only a few final year cadets were present at the venue to watch the battle, but after hearing how Gustav totally decimated the place and won, a lot of them had decided to be present and witness a battle between him and a final year cadet in person. The surroundings of the Devil's Canyon were filled with tons of cadets at least twice, compared to the last time Gustav battled with a final year. He secretly hosted a bet amongst the cadets using points. He was planning to spend a lot of points to purchase something in one of the shops, so he wanted to use this as an opportunity to replenish. Of course, betting wasn't allowed, so he had to do this covertly. You really believe Gustav Crimson would win against von Tridesel? Ha ha ha, he's ranked 78 for a reason. Count me in. I'm putting 10,000 points on Vaughn. Ha, you second years are delusional. Gustav may be good, but he's going against a higher rank this time. Even I can't beat Vaughn, so I'm putting 7,000 points on him. He grinned from ear to ear as he moved about the place, arguing with the conceited seniors about the match and placing bets. Gustav arrived on the scene a few moments later, attracting all the attention to himself. Yo, Gus, my man. Make sure you take care of this, he gave Gustav pats on his shoulder as he voiced out. Okay. Gustav wondered why he was speaking weirdly, but he still answered. Eldris shook his head from the side. You sly fox, he laughed lightly as he voiced out. Hey, come on now. We'll share some of it with everyone. Gus, just make sure you take care of that Vaughn properly, or it'll be doomed, he said with a look of enthusiasm. Crook. Falco also voiced from the side. It's just business, he. Why is the MBO so stuck up? He responded with a light chuckle. See you guys in a few. Gustav didn't know what he was up to, but he wasn't bothered. He stared at his opponent, who was thousands of feet below in between the canyon up ahead. Dark clouds hung above this area, and occasionally lightning bolts struck down. The lightning bolts were not only random, but were of different colors as well. Some of them had different effects on the environment. Based on the color, it might affect the gravitational state of the environment and could cause sound disruption or spatial phenomena. It was completely random how things could go. Some of the phenomena might even be disadvantageous to an opponent and may be a boon to the other. Gustav leaped across the air, traveling several hundred meters in an instant. Bang! He landed right in the middle of the dimly lit canyon, causing wind and waves of water to blast across the surroundings. The person several 10 feet away had white shoulder-length hair and almost completely slit eyes. It was barely noticeable, but his eyes could be seen cackling with white light. He stared intently at Gustav the moment he arrived on the scene. I hope you're ready to lose woefully? Vaughn voiced out. I could ask you the same, Gustav answered with an unbothered tone. From the moment you decided to show up, it was already your loss. Vaughn's tone of speaking had subtle hints within, which made Gustav feel something was up. However, even with that, Gustav was even more interested in seeing what the opponent was up to. After a barrier had been constructed all around the Devil's Canyon, the instructor supervising the duel gave the go-ahead for the battle to begin. Threra, a bolt of lightning descended from the sky, slamming straight onto the ground in the middle of the two. Frew, the moment massive waves of water blasted across the surroundings from lightning making contact with the stream. Gustav and Vaughn charged forward. Swoosh, sowuv, tchrrrhhh, electric arcs could be seen phasing out of Vaughn's back as he sped forward, moving even faster than Gustav. Bang! Gustav and Vaughn's fists collided with each other, sending everything within a radius of up to 500 meters flying due to the shockwaves generated from their clash. The stream parted ways, and the grounds quaked immensely as Vaughn slid a few feet backward, leaving lines of cracks on the ground due to that. Gustav still stood firm even though his feet had sunk into the ground a little, but he could feel his arm was a little numb from the electric currents that ran through his body when he collided with Vaughn. Chapter 8:24. Gustav still stood firm even though his feet had sunk into the ground a little, but he could feel his arm was a little numb from the electric currents that ran through his body when he collided with Vaughn. How did it not have any effect on him? That would have paralyzed a level 30 mixed breed for at least a few seconds. Vaughn wondered as his eyes squinted even more. Both of them charged toward each other again, throwing hands. Unlike the last time, more visible electric arcs could be seen swarming across Vaughn's body as he moved forward like a lightning bolt. Boom! Bang! 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 Both parties clashed multiple times, blasting waves of destruction across the place. Gustav swerved slightly towards him as he dodged an immensely quick fist attack and reached out to grab Vaughn's arm before swinging him towards the side. Bang! Vaughn slammed onto the ground, causing loud quakes to travel across the area. Gustav raised his leg and stomped down towards Vaughn's chest area, but Vaughn quickly rolled to the side with speed and dashed quickly to Gustav's back. Electric arcs coated his arm as he chopped towards Gustav's right shoulder area. Without turning around, Gustav raised his right hand and grabbed onto Vaughn's wrist just before his palm could make contact. Bang! A strong force blasted across the place as the ground parted ways, and Gustav sunk into it by 2 feet due to the immense strength behind the attack. Vaughn groaned as he found out he couldn't pull his arm backward and tried using his second arm to attack Gustav from behind. The same action repeated itself as Gustav grabbed onto the arm, sinking a little bit deeper into the ground. Vaughn opened his eyes wider at this point, and lightning arcs could be seen traveling within them. His body conducted a wave of electricity that ran across his arms towards Gustav. Hi-yo! He yelled as he sent electric currents running through Gustav's body so he could get him to release his arms. Gustav's body transformed at this point as reddish-brown scales appeared all over his arms, and his legs turned even bulkier. The massive electric charge that had just been unleashed could barely faze him as Gustav proceeded to drag Vaughn and flung him forward. The intensity of the pull shocked Vaughn greatly as he found his body spiraling across the air. Bang! He slammed into a mountain by the side, causing debris to blast across the place. Gustav jumped out of the hole he had sunk into at this and dashed forward. Sprint has been activated. His figure darted and appeared instantly in front of the same place he had sent Vaughn crashing in as his fist swung forward. Vaughn reacted by pushing himself out of the hole as quickly as he could to dodge Gustav's attack. His speed was still able to contend with Gustav's, even with sprint activated. Bang! Gustav's fist slammed into the mountain, causing cobwebs like arcs to spread across it as chunks and boulders came crashing down. Gustav moved quickly to the side and pushed both hands forward to grab Vaughn before he could get away. Vaughn gritted his teeth and pushed his hands forward as well, causing both of their palms to get locked in a power grip. Gustav pushed forward, causing Vaughn to start sliding backward. Just this action alone had proven Gustav to be superior in strength, but Vaughn kept releasing electric currents to numb Gustav. Gustav pushed him down, causing Vaughn's knees to buckle as he slowly descended with his knees close to kissing the ground while still trying to push Gustav back. The ground cracked from the sheer intensity of the power brawl between both of them. How can he be this strong? I am among the highest in terms of brute strength among the final year cadets. Vaughn could not believe his eyes as he saw Gustav easily overpower him. He could see the glint in Gustav's eyes which depicted that this wasn't difficult in any way, and he was enjoying this moment. I will not accept such humiliation, Vaughn shouted out before his knees could touch the ground. All of a sudden, he began transforming. Silver-colored scales appeared all over his body as a 16 inches long horn green out of his forehead, and his body increased massively in size. Grrrrrrhhhhh, he growled loudly as a pair of wings grew out of his back, and his arms transformed into that of a beast with claws. He looked down at Gustav while still growing in size as he kept holding onto his palm. At this point, he had grown up to 20 feet tall. Even with Gustav's height had reached 8 feet, looked like a dog standing before an elephant. Gasps could be heard from the spectators' area as the cadets stared with looks of amazement. This was nothing new to the final year cadets, but the second years had never witnessed such transformation before. Isn't that a rare lineage-type bloodline? Some of them seemed to have recognized Vaughn's form even though they had never witnessed it because, at the moment, Vaughn looked like a silver-scaled dragon. Electric arcs swum around his body as he pushed down on Gustav's palm with intensity, causing the ground to blast further open from the force. Gustav, too, hadn't expected this, but he held his own despite the massiveness of the form Vaughn had taken. His legs buckled a little, but then he managed to adapt to the change in strength and held the massive paws upwards. How is this possible? Even after taking my lineage form, he is still able to contend with me in terms of strength? Vaughn's mind was spiraling from the shock and humiliation he felt. He initially thought he wouldn't have to use all of his strength to battle Gustav, but now that he had even transformed, he couldn't believe Gustav was still able to hold on. A lightning bolt suddenly descended from the sky and landed right on Vaughn. The second years thought this was going to be the end for him, but then... Chapter 8:25. The second-year cadets thought this was going to be the end for him, but then... Thruruwa, the lightning bolt was distributed all across Vaughn's draconic-looking figure. Gustav could feel Vaughn getting energized from this lightning bolt, but before he could react, THRRHHH bang. A lightning blast radiated from Vaughn's body, slamming heavily into Gustav and sending him flying backward. The upper part of Gustav's cadet uniform turned into ash. He traveled across the air and slammed into the left side of the canyon. GRRHHHHHHRR. A loud growl was heard from Vaughn as he stood tall with lightning arcs swimming around him. Lightning bolts of different colors could be seen in the darkened clouds in the area. THRRHHHH, THRRHHH, THRRHHH. His voice was like a calling for them as lightning bolts began to strike down vigorously in different colors. They all slammed into Vaughn as he stood there, receiving their lashing. Just like before, his power kept increasing the more they slammed down. At this point, the gravitational state of the environment was immensely disrupted as rocks and small stones could be seen floating in midair. Vaughn suddenly opened his mouth, shooting out massive lightning bolts joined together towards Gustav's direction before he could get out of the hole. Thrara, the entire mountain area by the side exploded as it came crashing down from the intensity of the lightning strikes. The bolts were so powerful that even the spectator area had begun to quake from the massive force. The second years were awed seeing what had just happened and stared at the battle area seeing the immense destruction that had occurred. Compared to Rufai, who Gustav had defeated last time, Vaughn seemed significantly stronger. The final years were not in any way surprised to see this happen. They had thought Gustav would be able to do better than this, but seeing this, some of them were disappointed. At this point, everyone thought this was the end, and Gustav must have been buried in the pile of rubble. However, just a few moments later, boom, a loud blast reverberated across the surroundings as a figure phased out of the pile of rubble, flying into the sky. That's an interesting bloodline, Gustav voiced out as he stared at Vaughn in his draconic form down below. His upper body was bare and blackened from the lightning bolts, but otherwise, he seemed fine. The spectators were once again left speechless as they saw Gustav ascending across the air like he was uninjured. Vaughn's eyes widened as he saw Gustav flying. Unbelievable. Even if that didn't kill him, it would have come close, but he seems fine. Vaughn gritted his teeth as his wings spread out and flapped. Fwyi, the flapping of his wings sent wind flying across the vicinity as he ascended straight into the air, arriving in front of Gustav. Hiya! Vaughn screamed out, causing lightning bolts to gather in his mouth as they blasted out towards Gustav once more. Swerving towards the side in midair, Gustav flew forward with speed, arriving beside Vaughn as he sent his fist flying towards Vaughn's side. Power boost has been activated. Bang! His fist slammed into the draconic figure, causing big waves to radiate across the surroundings as Vaughn was sent hurtling across the air. To his surprise, did his power increase again? He wondered as he managed to stabilize himself after some time and follow Gustav's speed as he dashed across the air. Bang! 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 Multiple blows were traded between them in midair as they flew about the place with immense speed. A lot of second-years cadets were unable to follow their speed completely, which made it look like black and white streaks dashing across the air. 1 second they were on the east, and the next, they had appeared over 3,000 feet away from their initial position in midair. This continued for close to 30 seconds till Gustav finally pulled away, seeing as it had gotten to the time limit for hover. All this time, it looked like they were both on the same level of strength, but in reality, the final years had noticed that Gustav was pushing Vaughn back bit by bit and inflicting little damage on his silver scales. It's been nice doing this, but it's finally time to end this, Gustav voiced out as he floated several hundred feet away with a smirk on his face. What do you mean by that? Vaughn asked as he suddenly felt a sense of foreboding. Combination has been activated. Mutated bull plus demonic bunny plus blood wolf plus Savrina serpent plus solar. You'll find out in a few. Gustav responded to Vaughn as his body began transforming. Vaughn saw this and hurriedly flew forward to attack. However, bam! He slammed into an invisible barrier the moment he arrived a few feet away from making contact with Gustav. Bang! 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 He began slamming on this barrier repeatedly as Gustav transformed. In the next few moments, Gustav had transformed into a menacing-looking creature with glowing white eyes, purplish and golden-colored scales covering some parts of his body, and a muscular-looking 10-foot-tall physique. He had made use of the ultimate combination form. Unlike before, Gustav could add one more mixed breed to this, so he was even more powerful. "It's over," Gustav voiced out as his eyes radiated with bright white color. Fwyi, pushing his palm forward. Vaughn suddenly lost control of his body and found himself flying towards Gustav. Gustav grabbed him by the neck. Even in this massive form he had taken and blasted forward with immense speed. Boom! It sounded like the air was being torn apart as he slammed Vaughn into the side of a mountain, blasting straight through. Vaughn's massive body was used as a plowing tool as Gustav pushed forward into the mountain with him in front. Boom! They arrived out the other side and slammed into the barrier, preventing their battle from affecting the spectators. Luckily, they had made this one stronger compared to the last, so it was able to hold. Gustav turned around and flung him forward again. Vaughn found himself unable to fight against Gustav's newfound strength and immense speed. Chapter 8:26. He wanted to open his mouth and blast out lightning bolts again, but Gustav suddenly arrived behind his body that was flying across the air and punched him to the ground. Bang! He slammed into the ground several thousand feet below, causing shockwaves to spread across the place as the ground caved in from the impact. Gustav stood in midair and pushed his hands downwards again. A red solar-like wave jetted out from his palm, slamming straight into Vaughn down below and pushing him further into the ground. At this point, the ground had caved in way more, and a massive crater had been formed. Vaughn could feel the intense red solar-like wave tearing open his scales and penetrating through as his body kept getting pushed deeper and deeper into the ground. He screamed in pain as he found himself unable to fight against this power in any way. Fwyi, Gustav suddenly descended with speed, falling faster than a shooting star. Bang! He landed right on top of Vaughn, causing a loud bone-cracking sound to ring out across the vicinity. At this point, Vaughn's silver-colored scales were soaked in blood in some parts, while in other parts, they had completely been torn off his body. Gustav looked down at Vaughn's face as he stood with one leg atop Vaughn's head and the other on the ground. Vaughn was still conscious, but Gustav had stomped his face into the dirt. "Will you forfeit yourself, or do you still want more?" Gustav asked with an aloof expression displayed on his face. "Ghhhrhhgtofme." Vaughn's muffled voice could be heard coming from underneath. I guess I've been too lenient," Gustav stated as he took his foot off Vaughn's face. He jumped slightly and landed on Vaughn's back. Gustav proceeded to squat slightly and grab hold of Vaughn's pair of wings with both his hands. Vaughn's eyes widened as he felt Gustav's firm grasp on his wings. He tried to shake Gustav off, but unfortunately, he was too weak to do so. What areyou? He was about to question Gustav when he was cut short. "This will give you enough motivation to give up," Gustav said before pulling both wings fiercely. A loud ripping sound reverberated across the environment as the wings were torn off Vaughn's body. "Kai Erhar." Vaughn screamed loudly in pain as blood jetted out of his back. Gasp sounds of shocked gasps reverberated across the place as the spectating cadets stared with frightful looks. They couldn't believe what had just happened. They couldn't fathom how badly that would hurt and wondered how this would affect Vaughn when he transformed back into a human form. Gustav held onto both wings that were as large as his current size for a brief moment and threw them to the sides. Not only was Vaughn writhing and screaming due to pain, but also because he knew this would affect him physically. Damage like this would affect his lineage bloodline, and even using high-grade recovery pills will be unable to heal him for a very long time. "I for fight," he screamed out in pain as his body began to transform back into human form. Gustav climbed off him at this point without a shred of remorse on his face. The instructors quickly deactivated the barrier and moved into the battle area to cater to the injured Vaughn. Gustav deactivated the ultimate combination form and leaped out of the canyon. Fwyi. Bam! He landed several thousand feet ahead of where the spectators were situated. They cleared the way for him as he walked forward with an expressionless look. Gustav could see the look of fright in some of their eyes, and he just happened to spot the final year cadet he would be battling in the next 2 days somewhere among the crowd. A smirk appeared on Gustav's face as he stared at him for a moment while still walking away. The cadet, who happened to be the friend of Vaughn, who had just gotten defeated, gulped down saliva while trying to hide his troubled expression. Yes. Haha, you did it, man. He suddenly jumped forward out of nowhere and latched onto Gustav's back. Ildris, Falco, Angie, Matilda, and the others also phased out of the crowd and moved toward Gustav to cheer for him. Now I'm gonna be stinking rich, he screamed out again while still latching onto Gustav's back and waving his right hand around. What are you doing, man? Timmy nearly facepalmed as he saw actions. Rich? How? Gustav asked. Got off Gustav's back at this point and laughed lightly. Y'all pay up, he voiced out as he began moving towards different spots in the crowd. The final year cadets who had bet with him had looks of disappointment as their faces squeezed up. Don't forget my share. Ada appeared out of nowhere and voiced out as well. She had bet on Gustav winning just like went about collecting his and Ada's winnings while the others stared at them with dropped eyes. He's really conducting illegal activities on campgrounds happily. Ildris shook his head as he voiced out. In a flash, another day had gone by, and Gustav had spent all this time training as expected. He would occasionally spend time with the others and Angie when he was less busy. The hype of Gustav winning the second final year cadet still hadn't died down, and at this point, the final year cadets knew his first win wasn't by luck. This was a top 100 cadet that had been defeated. No one still knew how powerful the form Gustav took was, but they knew for sure that the moment Gustav took that form, it became impossible for Vaughn to contend anymore. They had witnessed Gustav use other abilities in the fight against Rufai, so they knew he still had other options at his disposal. This thought alone made them see Gustav as not just the strongest second-year cadet, but also one of the strongest in the entire camp. Vaughn still hadn't recovered from the injury Gustav inflicted on him despite getting treatments from the finest medical practitioners in camp. Chapter 8:27. According to them, Vaughn would take 3 months to fully recover. Gustav had heard about this, but he wasn't bothered. Instead, he researched Vaughn's type of bloodline and discovered it came from a family called the Vertigons. They all had this lineage bloodline with the ability to take a kind of draconic form and use different abilities. Just like the fairy tales of old, some could spew fire from their mouths, some could breathe frost, and Vaughn's side of the family was able to release lightning bolts. Gustav was really intrigued about this type of bloodline and disappointed about being unable to acquire it. If Vaughn suddenly lost his bloodline, everything would point to him. It wasn't sensible to try acquiring the bloodline of anyone in camp just because they offended him. However, he had decided that if they met up and Vaughn tried to get on his nerves in the real world, he would take his bloodline. What a waste, Gustav said internally as he sat on his bed after putting away a book he got from one of the MBO libraries. This bloodline would have been useful because lightning could amp up the strength of the owner, and even the speed was contending against sprint. Gustav reckoned that one could even get faster the more they were charged up, and there was also flight ability. Tomorrow was the day Gustav would be battling the third final year cadet, and this one was 2 ranks higher than Vaughn. They were also best friends since they were always seen moving about camp together. At this point, most people believed this final year cadet would most likely lose to Gustav, too. So they were not really skeptical it would go differently. Rank 72 wasn't too far from 74. They were mostly looking forward to Gustav's 4th duel, which would be with a top 50 final year cadet next week. In a flash, the night went by, and the next morning arrived. The morning routines went by quickly, and the time for the duel arrived. Thompson batch. Explosive bloodline. Interesting. Gustav recalled the information on this particular final year cadet as he moved towards the location. In a few minutes, he had arrived and began to wait for his opponent, while cadets had arrived at the venue to spectate once more. Maybe I should have asked both of them to battle me together, Gustav thought aloud as he waited in the venue. 10 minutes turned into 20, and before everyone knew it, 30 minutes had gone by. Yet the opponent hadn't arrived. Chatter, chatter, chatter. The spectating cadets could be heard discussing the opponent's failure to show up in the background. Looks like he won't be showing up. Wow, what a final year disgrace. I mean, can you really blame him? I wouldn't show up after witnessing the battle 2 days ago either. I had hopes, but after 40 minutes of waiting, a person could be seen walking toward the instructor in charge of supervising the duel. He whispered something to him, and the instructor moved towards the middle of the battle area after a few moments. Thompson batch will not be showing up today due to processing a sudden breakthrough that came at the last minute, the instructor voiced out. The date of the duel will be moved indefinitely till both parties are fully prepared to duel again, he added with a loud tone. The loud chattering sounds became even louder as some of them voiced their disappointments. Gustav wasted no time in leaving the scene after this was announced. He wasn't necessarily bothered by this outcome or anything. Both cadets that intended to humiliate him had been paid by in kind. Vaughn was severely injured, while Thompson would be unable to show his face anywhere in camp without hearing excessive, degrading discussions about him in the background. Although the instructor had said he was undergoing a breakthrough, no one believed this information. They believed it was just a cover-up, and Thompson had chickened out at the last minute. No one could really blame him after seeing the state he put Vaughn in, but they still felt it was cowardly for a final year to chicken out at the end. But it was still better than receiving an injury that would last months before it could be recovered. Gustav decided to go back to training after this. Even though this was an unexpected development, he didn't think the number 36th cadet on the final year rankings would be a no-show. This was the person he would be facing next week, so in the meantime, he decided to focus on his training. At this point, only 2 weeks were left before he would be assigned his next mission. In the intergalactic space, a figure floated above a spherical blue mass that could be seen in the distance. Yeah, I'm back, I thought you were joking. It's been a while. It won't be bad to stop by for a while and also check out that case. Well, what are you waiting for? Come straight to me. Sure, but I think I see something. The figure floating in space seemed to be communicating with someone through a communication device. What is that? Nah, it's nothing. Must be my eyes. Do you have your disarming amulet with you? Yeah. Why do you ask? I thought you lost it again. You're fond of that. Hey, now it only happened once. I wouldn't want to be stuck outside, he voiced out as he flew downwards while bringing out a rhombus-shaped tool. Truruin, a blue formation appeared all around the bluish-colored planet he was flying towards. A small hole appeared in the part he was flying towards, and he flew straight through the hole, which closed back in the next instant. The blue formation surrounding the planet disappeared in the next instant, as did this figure. Boom. What sounded like a sonic boom reverberated across space in the next instant. Chapter 828. Boom. What sounded like a sonic boom reverberated across space in the next instant. Days went by within the MBO camp, and Gustav resumed his training as expected. The quest to stay away from Indrik had a particular punishment for failure that hadn't taken effect yet. Other failure punishments like taking 10 points off Gustav's attributes and others had already taken effect, but this particular one still hadn't. It had been counting down all this time, and on this particular day, only a few hours were left. Why can't you just cancel it? Gustav asked. I don't have control. The moment you decided to fail the quests, there was no way to escape the punishments that would come with it, the system voiced out in his head. This is annoying. You shouldn't have issued the quest in the first place, Gustav responded to the system. I needed to keep the truth away from you. Don't worry, they'll provide you with assistance when you get teleported away, the system said with an apologetic tone. It's a good thing I already told the instructors I will be unavailable today. It would have been difficult to explain my disappearance had this punishment not been on a timer, Gustav said once more. It was around 5 a.m. in the morning, and Gustav had been awake all night, channeling his bloodline. In front of him was a notification that displayed a timer for one of the system's punishments. Punishment: survive in an unknown part of the Shardishi planet for 24 hours. Punishment will begin in 234 HRS. Gustav wanted to facepalm, knowing there was no information on this planet anywhere within the MBO camp, so he was just going in blindly. He didn't know that the system had already scanned the MBO camp beforehand to pick a place unknown before it added this to the list of punishments. Right now, Gustav was just waiting till the appointed time. He didn't know what he would be facing there, so he had prepared himself for the unexpected. Gustav filled even his storage device with different items ranging from survival tools to small technological items. In a flash, hours went by, and the set time finally arrived. Love, 2-1. Gustav looked around at the last second before. Zing, a bright flash of light encapsulated his figure, and he disappeared the next instant. At the same time he disappeared, drills had started for the day in camp. Fortunately, Gustav had also told his friends he would be unavailable, so no one would be coming to knock on his door in the next 24 hours. Everyone believed he was probably reaching a breakthrough point in his bloodline channeling. Gustav found himself standing under a starry sky in the next few moments. The stars in the sky were clustered together in various formats, taking different shapes with some forming weird imageries due to that. Some of them were large to the point where they looked like miniature moons. The entire environment was covered in transparent pinkish fog and floating flickers of white light. The visibility of the environment was greatly lowered due to this, and the white lights within this world of pinkish fog looked dense. Gustav looked down and could barely see his foot. The pinkish fog was denser closer to the ground, and lighter the higher one looked. On the western part of the skies, two gigantic blade-shaped moons could be seen positioned right beside each other. For smaller spherical-shaped moons could be seen by their sides, and every small moon was of the color indigo, while the bigger ones were lighter with a shade of blue. There was no doubt that Gustav was currently in another world. No oxygen, Gustav voiced out. The air felt murky and stagnant when he tried breathing earlier. Fortunately, Gustav had already pictured a scenario where this was a probability, so he took a shot of a drug that provided the lungs with enough oxygen to last him 12 hours. When the 12 hours were up, he would take another shot of the drug, which would make it possible for him to stay here without breathing for the next 12 hours he was supposed to be here. Another thing Gustav considered was the gravitational force of the planet, so at the moment, he had a custom-made backpack that would assist him in staying on the ground if the gravitational force was similar to that of Earth's moon. After looking around and seeing nothing else in the distance, Gustav decided to start walking. With every step he took, pinkish dust would scatter underneath his feet, causing the pinkish fog in the surroundings to increase. Gustav could sense that the gravitational force was a little different compared to Earth, but it wasn't like the Earth's moon either. God Eyes has been activated. Gustav's vision traveled very far as he looked up ahead to observe the surroundings. Right now, he could see as far as 60 miles, and there was nothing noticeable in the environment. He looked east and west as well, but still, there was nothing. After walking for some time, Gustav stood in place. I only have to survive. Who says I have to move around for that? I could just stand still in one place, Gustav voiced out. You can't do that, the system stated. Why not? The punishment just asked me to survive, Gustav questioned with a look of confusion. Remember I said I would help? I will pass on some information about this planet to you right now, the system said. In the next moment, Gustav's eyes turned listless as information began to flow into his mind. After a few seconds, he returned to normal. Oh, so that is why I can't stay in one position, Gustav voiced out while looking at the ground. Below his kneecaps area was densely covered in this pinkish fog that he could barely make out the ground. It's better to find an higher ground first, the system added. Chapter 829. It's better to find an higher ground first, the system added. Well, judging by the size of the planet from the information you gave me, that is going to take some time, Gustav voiced out as he looked up ahead. I guess it's time to fly. I need a better outlook on the surroundings, Gustav voiced out. He would have just activated sprint and zoomed off, but due to the bad visibility of the surroundings, flying would be better for him, so he could see from a higher point of view. Gustav activated Hover and began to float in mid-air. Right now, Hover granted him flight ability for 30 seconds. Initially, he could just float and move around a bit in mid-air. He couldn't really call it flying because he could not move as fast as he would like to when it was activated. However now, swoosh, after reaching a particular height in the sky, he zoomed off across the air. With God Eyes activated, he could see everywhere on a larger scale while he flew across the vicinity. The pinkish fog was literally everywhere, and Gustav had noticed at this point that he was in an area of the planet where the sands were pink. Since flying made him defy gravity, he was unbothered by the weird gravitational force of the environment. He flew speedily across the air for around 20 seconds before he finally noticed something in his line of sight. Thousands of meters away in the northeast area, he could see a massive pointy green shard protruding from the ground. It looked like a spear shooting straight into the sky due to its length. It had rough-looking surfaces and small round holes within. Gustav flew in that direction, and the closer he got to it, the more he realized just how big it was. "Are you sure you want to go there?" the system asked. Gustav already knew what the system was referring to, and it was the fact that places like these were considered breeding houses for a type of insect-like species that survive on this planet. "Yeah, I didn't forget the information you just gave. Hover is about to run out of time and deactivate. High ground is needed, and this is the only one available so far," Gustav voiced out in response. Not only was he using God Eyes to scan the area as well as his perception, but he knew well that they wouldn't find any other high ground for hundreds of miles. Hover had a time lock whenever it ran out of time and was deactivated. Gustav wouldn't be able to use it again for about 10 minutes, so the plan now was to land atop that massive greenish-looking shard protruding from the ground. FYI, Gustav ascended further in the air for about another 1,000 feet before he arrived at the top area of the greenish shard. The top was a bit pointy and sloppy, but Gustav managed to find his balance as he landed on it. The top was big enough to cover around a 20 feet wide radius, and holes could be seen all over that faintly displayed the inside of the massive shard. Each hole was around the size of a palm, so Gustav couldn't fall through even if he stood above any of them. Gustav held onto one side of the top of the shard and stood in place, looking around. There was nothing to be seen for miles, just as expected. He had decided he would wait till the time lock for Hover was over. He didn't want to make use of the ultimate combination form for flight purposes because that depleted a lot of energy, and he wanted to make sure he had enough to last him this 24 hours since he didn't really know what to expect. The system had given him some information on this planet, but even the system had limited information about this place, so he could only make do with what he had. Anything unexpected could happen at any time. Just as Gustav was having some random thoughts while waiting, he sensed something and looked down. Shifting his left foot a little, he looked through the hole and could see hundreds of feet below was a greenish cotton-like figure. "Is that how they look?" Gustav asked with a slight look of astonishment. "That's..." The system had barely answered when this greenish cotton-like figure began to separate. Gustav's eyes widened slightly as the cotton-like figure separated into thousands of smaller cotton-like fragments and began to crawl upwards. It was almost like every part of their body was made out of tiny cotton-like legs. "There's a whole lot of them," Gustav voiced out as these things began to crawl upwards speedily. At this point, he could tell they were most likely coming for him. "I really don't want to find out what they can do so." Gustav's hands lit up in flames in the next moment. Fruum bluish flames blasted out of his hands towards the holes beneath. The tongue of flames collided with these cotton-like creatures and set them ablaze. Some of them began to rapidly drop like moths that had been lit up. After a few seconds, Gustav eased up on the flames and looked through the holes again. The massive ball of the cotton-like figure had cleared up as well as the many of them crawling up the walls within the shard. Gustav heaved a sigh of relief after he saw this, but in the next instant, he sensed movement once more. God Eyes has been activated. His eyes glowed up as he looked through the top of the massive shard-like structure. Gustav's eyes slightly widened as he spotted these same greenish, cotton-like figures far beneath the shard-like structure. They were clustered together and pulsating like a heart, so much that it gave one the creeps. Unlike the small numbers Gustav saw them in earlier, this time, they were way more numerous. Chapter 830. Another thing that surprised him was how they had changed colors from green to bright blue. The creatures began to crawl up even faster than before, lighting up the internal structure of the shard as they swarmed upwards. What the hell are those things? Gustav voiced out as he prepared to use another long-range attack. He didn't want to use something overly powerful so he would not destroy the entire structure, so Gustav decided to take some items from his storage device. 3 small circular-shaped metallic balls. He dropped them through the hole. These small balls fell into the middle of this swarm of an unknown creature, and 3 small blasts were heard within the massive shaft-like structure. Boom, boom, boom. The structure vibrated a bit from the force of the explosions, but luckily, it didn't have too much effect as the structure remained standing. Smoke drifted upwards from the holes on the tip of the shard-like structure. The internal part was filled with smoke and barely visible. Gustav should have looked relieved at this point, seeing the effect that these had caused, but he looked even more astonished than before as he kept staring in the direction of the hole where smoke was still drifting out. "They are still alive," Gustav voiced out as his pupils dilated and he zoomed his eyes further in. Some of the cotton-like creatures had turned from light blue to a shade of red as well and were close to reaching the top at this point. Boom, boom, boom. Flames with a mixed color of red, blue, and green began shooting out from the holes. Gustav quickly moved away, dodging one of the finger-sized flames that flew out of the hole he was staring into. SHHHHSSHHHZZZ. The air sizzled from the hotness of the thousands of flames shooting upwards out of the hole. Gustav had to start swerving across the top of this shard to dodge these thousands of small flames, jetting out with little to no space around. Moving back once more on the west side, Gustav's foot slipped as he got to the edge, and his body slanted backward as he nearly fell off. His upper body slanted to the point where his back would almost be at ground level if he was standing on the ground. Pushing his body upwards, Gustav quickly moved to the side to dodge another one. "This is troublesome." Just as Gustav voiced this out, the cotton-like creatures began to climb out of the shard. They instantly headed for Gustav as they piled up on each other in different sets of swarms. An atomic blade appeared in Gustav's hand as he began to swing them across the place. Swai slash. He was finally using an attack that affected these creatures as the atomic blade disintegrated the ones it made contact with as he swung out repeatedly. Host has killed alien life form Garglewort plus 5000 EXP. Host has killed alien life form Garglewort plus 5000 EXP. Host has killed alien life form Garglewort plus 5000 EXP. However, anyone that was not snuffed out instantly and only slightly damaged would explode. Gustav found himself nearly falling off the top of the shard again as the first explosion took him by surprise, which triggered others as well. On the part of the shard Gustav was standing on, cracks appeared, and in the next moment, he had his foot stuck in a hole that had been created due to the top giving away. Ugh, Gustav groaned as he felt stings on his left leg. Toxins have infiltrated host bloodstream. Toxins have infiltrated host bloodstream. Toxin immunity has been activated. Toxin is being analyzed. Gustav pulled his leg out in the next instant and could see many of these Gargleworts latched onto his leg. Gustav covered his entire left leg in milky-colored light, knowing flames wouldn't harm them as he shoved them off. They began disintegrating into nothingness, and more notifications popped up in his line of sight. Gustav's leg was now freed of them, but not only had it turned green, but he could also barely feel his left foot, and many more of the Gargleworts were headed for him in such outrageous numbers they had formed what looked like balls of cotton the size of a human. Going down might be the best option now. They'll just destroy this entire structure, Gustav voiced out as he decided not to hold back anymore. "You can't do that," the system responded in his head. "Why not?" Gustav asked with a slightly annoyed look. "Look down." The system started with a tone of urgency. Gustav turned his face to the side and looked down. The pinkish fog had turned red, and just like it was when pink, it was denser the closer in proximity it was to the ground. "It started," Gustav voiced out. He nearly face-bombed at this point because the timing couldn't be any worse. Going down was no longer an option, and he needed to keep this structure standing. Toxins have been successfully cleared from host bloodstream. Gustav felt his leg returning to normal as this notification popped up in his line of sight. All right, enough of this. I'll just make my high ground then, Gustav voiced as his entire body glowed up with milky-colored light. Boom! A wave of atomic disintegration energy phased out of him, obliterating all the Garklewarts in the vicinity. But, unfortunately, the part of the shard Gustav was standing on wasn't spared. As the blast of milky light disintegrated everything in the vicinity, a quarter of the top part of the shard-like structure also disappeared. Fly-high Gustav began to fall at this point into the shard-like structure where more of these creatures could be seen hiding. His body bloated as his skin turned green. The moment he arrived within the middle part of the shard-like structure, he stuck his fingers into one of the holes, which prevented him from falling farther in. Placing his other hand on the internal walls of the shard, icicle-like rocks began to shoot out of the wall. Crow, crow, crow. Chapter 831. Placing his other hand on the internal walls of the shard, icicle-like rocks began to shoot out of the wall. Kraukrokrall, the Iro silk from the partial collapsal alien from Gustav, took a shot across the place straight down to the bottom, destroying the inside of the massive shard. Energy discharge has been activated. Boom! Red energy blasted forth from Gustav's being, destroying the entirety of the shard as it spread across the vicinity. The other Garklewarts below were disintegrated into fine powder as the energy blast was too much for them to absorb. As the shard was destroyed from the inside out, Gustav fell but landed on an extension from the Iro silk he had shot out earlier. The Iro silk had formed a kind of spiky fortress protruding from the ground. It had taken the place of the shard that had just gotten destroyed. Gustav held onto it and allowed the icicle-like rocks to multiply immensely, which allowed them to shoot further into the ground and form an even sturdier fortress as he stood atop it. After some time, Gustav stared at the ground area, which was still several thousand feet below. The fog in the air was still red, but since he was high above, it happened to be very sparse around him. As expected, it was way denser below, and Gustav couldn't even see the bottom of the Iro silk due to this, but he could feel something that made him constantly replicate Iro silk. It's worse than I thought, Gustav voiced out. I told you, the system responded. It's even eating up the Iro silk at the bottom. With how sturdy it is, even atomic disintegration would not be able to make it disappear this quickly, Gustav stated. It turned out that the color of the sands in this part of the planet changed color occasionally. When it was pink, it meant the grounds were safe to travel on, and the color of the fog in the air due to that had no negative effects. However, the moment it turned red, that would mean it was no longer conducive. The red color of the sand and the fog was toxic to any life or object. According to the information the system gave him, Gustav would find his body evaporating and turning into a black puddle in a matter of minutes if he traveled on the ground when the fog had changed to a red color. Gustav could use his ability to wave them off for some time, but that would mean he would be spending energy excessively, which would affect him negatively since he was spending 24 hours here. This was why he had to find high ground. The problem now was that he had destroyed the high ground, so now he had to maintain the high ground he created, which was also depleting energy. Gustav reckoned whatever material used to create the massive shard he was standing on earlier was special since this fog probably didn't have any effect on it. His Iro silk, on the other hand, had to be replicated by the second at the bottom area, or everything would come crashing down. After a few more seconds, Gustav voiced out, "It's time. Hover has been activated." He floated above the Iro silk after activating hover and turned north. I have to find another high ground in 30 seconds, Gustav said internally as he zoomed off across the sky. His speed caused the red fog in the air to part ways as he blasted across the sky. Gustav activated God Eyes, so he was able to see hundreds of meters ahead. After about 25 seconds of flying, Gustav had spotted a cone-shaped high ground up ahead. Gustav didn't care whether or not this structure seemed suspicious. He just flew towards it without wasting time and landed atop it. The top area was more than 3,000 feet above ground level. It was so wide that Gustav felt it was comparable to the size of an island. Several weird black-colored grasses could be seen protruding from the surface of this grayish cone-shaped structure. Gustav moved around the top area, looking to see if he could find signs of life, but there was nothing to be seen around here. Gustav heaved a sigh of relief as hover deactivated and began counting down. This was a good breather from the craziness he had just endured with the thousands of Garklewarts trying to kill him. He proceeded to sit in a cross-legged position atop the cone-shaped structure and closed his eyes to channel his bloodline. He felt since this place seemed rather okay, he could hide out here till the end of the 24s was over. It had only been a few seconds since Gustav closed his eyes when he felt like something was watching him. He opened his eyes and looked around, but he couldn't find anything in the vicinity. Did I rejoice too soon? He wondered as he stood to his feet. What Gustav couldn't see was, from above the sky, he was actually standing on what looked like a circular platform. All of a sudden, there was a small tremor that made Gustav stagger a bit as he wondered what was happening. White suddenly appeared on the place he was standing as the grayish part moved to the side, forming a massive circular shape. It moved from right to left, and from left to right once more, passing underneath Gustav's feet. What is that an eyeball? Gustav's eyes widened a little as he figured it out despite the size. Grrrhhhhhh bang. The entire platform suddenly shook violently as small cracks appeared all over the place, and the structure ascended. Oh shit, Gustav rarely cursed. But this was an unprecedented moment as the structure rose further into the skies with him atop. Gustav was already like an ant standing on this platform initially. Now, he was like a grain of salt. Grayish-colored rocky shoulders appeared by the sides as the platform rose to more than 7,000 feet in the air and kept rising even after reaching such height. Chapter 832. From far ahead, one could see that Gustav was standing on a creature's head. The head had been the only thing protruding out of the ground initially, and it was already around 3,000 feet in length. There was no doubt that this creature would be humongous. Gustav wasted no time in using combination. Combination has been activated. Mutated bull plus demonic bunny plus blood wolf plus Savrina serpent plus solar worm. This wasn't the time to spare energy as he felt immense pressure from this creature encompassing the surroundings. Gustav instantly zoomed off across the air with immense speed after completing transformation. The skies parted ways behind him as a massive hand that bloated the reflection of light coming from the moon and stars descended upon him. Gustav's forehead broke a sweat as he stretched his hand out while flying and pushed forward as quickly as he could. The gravitational force of the environment ruptured as he cut a line across the air and disappeared. The middle finger of the massive hand missed his figure by a hairbreadth as Gustav reappeared up to 100 miles ahead. He had managed to replicate the ability Indrik used when chasing him back in camp. Gravitational ability branched off telekinesis and space manipulation, so he was able to replicate that same ability in a moment of danger. Bang! The gigantic hand landed on the ground, causing red dust to blast across the vicinity as the fog in the area increased in density. Even though Gustav had managed to outrun the gigantic hand, the wind stirred across the air and the red fog sent him spiraling across the air. Phew! The heavy winds that blasted fiercely across the place covered more than 100 miles. After being tossed across the air and carried by the wind turbulence without control for some time, Gustav finally managed to stabilize himself. At the moment, he couldn't even tell where east was from the west, but he could still sense a faint pressure from the massive creature, so he knew he had to move in the opposite direction. Gustav was fortunate because the creature still hadn't managed to completely pull its body out of the ground before it decided to attack him. If it was fully out of the ground, catching or swatting Gustav like he was some bug would come very easy. Gustav flew across the air for many minutes, not wanting to stop and transform back even though he was spending a lot of energy maintaining this form. He just wanted to make sure he had given himself a lot of distance between himself and whatever that creature was supposed to be. You have to be careful. According to my data, that was a Hyderia giant. There are still about 10 of them that exist on this planet. Fortunately, they stay very far away from each other due to enmity, but so there are low chances of you running into one for thousands of miles. The the system voiced out. That thing cannot be referred to as a giant. It's too humongous. It's practically a walking city. Despite the system's reassurance, Gustav's guard was still well up. What he had just witnessed was enough to traumatize anyone. If others had been in his shoes, they would have most likely pissed their pants. Gustav didn't doubt that the creature would be no shorter than the Embio Tower in Plankton City that was so tall it reached space. After flying for some time, Gustav found another highland and returned to his human form. However, the moment he did, another issue came up, and this place began to experience some weird weather turbulence. A tornado made out of a firestorm appeared, and one made out of water appeared. Another one made out of wind with lightning strikes within appeared around here as well. The red fog that nearly got him the other time was being stirred up, and he had to leave this high ground before it would get to him. Gustav activated hover once more and flew away from this place, looking for another highland. Scenarios kept playing out where he would run into one bad situation after arriving on highland. It was as if this entire world was out to get him. There was danger everywhere, and Gustav couldn't catch a break. He had said he would make sure he spent very little energy, but right now, he had already spent a quarter, and only 6 hours had passed since he arrived here. "This is all your fault," Gustav voiced out to the system as he fought a group of weird-looking snake-like creatures on another highland. "Oh, come on, don't cry over spilled tea," the system voiced out in response. The entire place was crawling with them, and no matter how many Gustav killed, more would appear. He was waiting for Hover to finish counting down as he cut down these venomous-looking creatures. "I thought you said you were going to help? You haven't really done anything," Gustav kept voicing out with an annoyed tone as he swung the atomic blades in his hand, repeatedly slicing these creatures' heads off. The system didn't want to interfere too much, knowing Gustav could learn from this experience. Difficult situations always lead to improvement. Proof of that was Gustav making use of the same ability Indrik had used to chase him back in camp. However, Gustav wouldn't stop complaining that this was the system's fault, so it finally decided to assist more. Host has been granted 2 times EP boost for the next 12 hours. Host has been granted 2 times HP boost for the next 12 hours. Skills time lockdown has been reduced by 70% for the next 12 hours. As Gustav saw the notifications, he nodded in satisfaction. At this point, Hover was now available for use again. Hover has been activated. Whoosh, Gustav lifted up into the air and zoomed off. He only had to survive for 12 hours more before the punishment would end. Chapter 833. Whoosh, Gustav lifted up into the air and zoomed off. He only had to survive for 12 more hours before the punishment would end. The serpentine-like creatures with rocky skins swarmed across the position he had just left. From above, it could be seen that they were coming from every direction, and some were even coming from under the ground. Gustav glanced back for a moment while zooming off across the sky. There were at least 1,000 of them. While flying away, Gustav pulled out a pill from his storage ring and swallowed it. This was meant to help him with the issue of no oxygen for the next 12 hours. Hours later, Gustav had repeatedly changed from one high ground to the other, still facing the same issues. The species on this planet were trying to kill him. Just as many species with different DNAs lived on Earth, this planet also had numerous species that were even more dangerous. Considering the planet's size was at least 8 times the size of Earth, it could even be speculated that there were even more crazy creatures to be found here. Gustav wondered if there were intelligent life forms living on this planet like humans on Earth. However, he felt he might never find out since he had not even managed to travel past a single region since he arrived here, even though he had been flying all night. Presently, it was daytime, and it turned out that the planet had 3 suns, and stars were still present in the skies even during daytime. One of the suns was light red with a part of it having blue features, while the other 2 suns, which were smaller than the first, were both bright aqua. The temperature of the planet during the day was neither cold nor hot. Gustav couldn't even describe how it felt basking under the glow of these 3 suns. While flying, Gustav noticed the color of the fog was changing once more. He looked down and saw it had transformed from red into a green color. "Is that safe?" Gustav asked as he paused in midair. I don't have information on the green fog, but I'm picking up different foreign components which I'm currently scanning for its effects, the system answered. Gustav conjured a diamond-like object from his palm and flung it down. It disappeared into the fog a few moments later after landing on the ground. God's Eyes was currently active, so Gustav was able to see the ground from high up despite the fog being very dense at the bottom. He watched the Iro silk for a few seconds, observing it to the very core and composition. However, there was no change to it in any way. The fog didn't affect it, but even with this, Gustav still wasn't convinced whether it was safe or not. "Oh, I guess I should stay away from the ground in the meantime till you determine whether it's safe or not," Gustav said before resuming flying. Gustav initially wanted to drop down and use himself as an experimental guinea pig to find out what exactly the effects of this fog were going to be on a living person, but he discarded the thought. Who knew if it would have irreversible negative effects on his body? Gustav spent the rest of the seconds he had left from hover, flying across the place and looking for safe, high ground. Unfortunately, hover ran out before he found any high ground, and he had to activate the ultimate combination form once more to remain above the ground. After 13 good minutes of flying across the air at a speed of 40 miles per second, Gustav finally could see a highland that looked like a building in the distance. It looked rigid and rough, like a bunch of grayish and red-looking stones stacked upon each other. But even with this, Gustav was a bit surprised since this was the first time he was finding anything remotely close to the looks of a building. The structure was oddly shaped like half a triangle with pole-like objects protruding from the sides. Before he landed on it, he could already see life forms in the vicinity. Gustav still had no choice but to land here since the ultimate combination form was taking up a lot of energy. Even with the system's boost, he had less than half of his original energy left at this point. The moment Gustav landed on what seemed to be like the 7th floor or this structure, he transformed back into his human form. The creatures in the vicinity were initially frightened, sensing the immense and powerful pressure from the approaching figure, but the instant Gustav transformed back, the pressure disappeared. The fear they had on their faces disappeared at this point as they began to head towards Gustav's current position from every nook and cranny of the surroundings. For hours left, Gustav voiced out with an elated voice. In the next 4 hours, this nightmarish experience would come to an end. Gustav couldn't wait to finally get back to his room and take a long shower. Despite the fact that he could stay awake for days without having a wink of sleep, this experience had worn him out due to always being on the alert every second. The experience in the underground mixed blood prison during the MBO tests was nothing compared to this, even though they had spent 2 weeks there. If he came here with the strength he had back then, he wouldn't survive an hour in here. Gustav turned to the side as he sensed figures approaching. If they created this, then they are slightly intelligent. I should try talking to them first before anything. I might be able to stay here for the next 4 hours and rest, Gustav thought as he began walking across what seemed to be a rough corridor. There were holes on the walls by the side that could not be called windows since they were so large. It felt like the inside was outside. Check out my WSA 2022 story cultivation through gaming. It has been rebooted with new chapters as well. Smiley face. Chapter 834. Grew. Gustav could hear shrill voices speaking in a foreign tongue. 2 short-looking red creatures were headed for Gustav with what looked like clubs in their grasp. These weren't actual clubs, but they were shaped like that and made with a weird-looking green stony material. Gray spikes could be seen all over the weapons as they held them forward while moving toward Gustav. Their weapons were just as big as theirs, yet they could lift them well enough. These short red creatures had pointy tails and 4 eyes on their square-shaped head with pot bellies. Grew. The 2 made more weird sounds as they moved closer to Gustav. Haggle alien lifeform language has been successfully decrypted. As this notification appeared in his line of sight, Gustav heard more footsteps getting closer from up ahead and in front. In a few moments, he was surrounded from behind and up ahead. They numbered in over 60 that had crowded him. Grew. The weird tone was heard from one of them up front again. However, unlike the last time, Gustav could completely understand what they said. I am not here to fight. Stay out of my way and he'll stay out of yours, Gustav voiced out as he began to walk forward. Gustav spoke in English, but his speech was being translated to the creature S with the help of the system. Gru, the one who spoke earlier, voiced out once more. It was the only one with a ruby stone attached to his weapon, and Gustav assumed this was their leader. What enemy? I don't know what you're talking about. They'll only be here for some time, and I won't bother anyone if I am not bothered. Gustav spoke calmly as he kept stepping forward. The creatures wanted to know if Gustav was an enemy figure sent by an opposing clan. Therefore, they had a suspicious look as they saw him walking towards them. The creatures yelled for him to stop in their unknown language, but Gustav ignored him and kept walking forward. One of them jumped up and swung the massive stone-like club towards Gustav's face. Gustav swerved slightly towards the left and swung his leg 180 degrees towards the right. Bam! His feet crashed into the face of the creature, sending it flying out of the open corridor area. This action alone caused the creatures to stand in place with fear. Even though the pressure they felt when Gustav was flying over had significantly reduced, they could tell he was no easy target. They parted ways as Gustav kept walking forward and arrived at the end of the corridor area. He leaped upwards towards the highest part of the structure and sat atop the roof. The creatures just stared at each other with awkward looks and looked up to see Gustav sitting in place without any intention of harming them. From up there, Gustav could see the environment better. This structure extended from the ground, where the fog was dense, to about 1,000 feet high up. The Rurdhaggles could be seen moving about on the ground. They seemed to be unbothered by the green fog, but this still didn't make Gustav any less bothered. The composition of materials and creatures on this planet was different from the composition of an Earthling. They all originate from this planet, so they were not bothered or harmed in any way by these toxic fogs, which were natural to them. What was natural to them was unnatural to him, and he was not in any way immune, so he still decided to play it safe and remain at the top of the structure. After what had happened, the creatures did not disturb Gustav anymore. Instead, they continued their initial activities, and Gustav felt he was finally free and could rest somewhere. It had been a long 20 hours, and he had spent a lot of energy points. He was glad this wasn't a punishment that came in his initial weaker days. He wondered if this was one of the hidden punishments among the other quests in the past that he completed. While Gustav was sitting in place, recovering his spent energy and waiting for time to pass completely, he noticed that the creatures were moving about the place like they were preparing for something. The Rurdhaggles were taking orders from the one with the red ruby on its weapon. They seemed quite jittery as they moved about the place. He also realized that their numbers were greater than he thought. Right now, he could count no less than 700 of them from his current position, and there were still more. Surely if they ganged up against him, he would have a fairly difficult time fending them off, but they seemed to have believed Gustav wasn't here to harm them. After what seemed like 3 hours, a series of yells made Gustav open his eyes. Knick frk carat VVC, Nruguojualantfek. The creatures could be seen lining up on the west side of the structure in a battle formation while holding onto their weapons. Gustav could sense movement from far ahead of them. He turned to the side and activated God Eyes. His eyes zoomed in, and he spotted a battalion of Rurdhaggle headed towards the structure with similar weapons. These ones looked slightly different from the ones here, as they were a shade browner than red. Gustav instantly figured out that this must be the opposing clan they mistook him for. It turned out there was a war going on around here. Screams and battle cries were heard as the two fronts charged toward each other. Gustav watched as a battle unfolded in front of him between the two sides. From the looks of things, both sides were equally matched in terms of battle prowess and numbers. However, things began to take a strange turn when the other side brought forth some weird-looking cauldrons, and it started shooting out round green sizzling balls. These projectiles started to decimate a lot of their numbers on this side. Gustav kept watching as the battle turned heated by the second. Chapter 835. The Rurdhaggle clan that owned this structure was putting up a good fight and tried as much as possible to decrease the other side's numbers. They changed their strategy to reduce the number of casualties and fight back. Gustav suddenly felt movement from the east, and turned to the side. His eyesight zoomed in on that area, and he noticed large numbers headed towards this structure as well. These types of haggles that were headed for the structure also looked a bit different, which made Gustav believe they were probably from another clan. Skirmish on both sides? Gustav voiced out with a contemplative tone. He wondered why other clans would choose to be enemies with this one and attack them, but Gustav was sure they wouldn't be able to handle attacks on two fronts when one was already difficult. As they drew closer, the haggle clan Gustav was currently in became aware. They panicked, but they quickly took battle formations and brought out some new weapons. 30 minutes left him. I should be able to hold out easy. At this point, Gustav stood to his feet and walked forward to the ledge of the roofing. Get back! He yelled out towards the haggles of this clan. Even though they were over 1,000 feet beneath, they heard his voice clearly. The system, too, had translated his voice to their language, so they understood. They first had confused expressions on their faces till they saw Gustav leap downwards. A wave of milky energy covered his figure as he descended with speed and pressure. Bang! He landed on the ground, causing the greenish fog to scatter across the vicinity. His body was currently coated in layers of atomic disintegration energy, so the fog could not get to him without disappearing. The instant Gustav landed in front of them and stretched his hand forward, gravitational displacement has been activated. Swoo with the other side, which numbered over 500, found themselves floating in mid-air as Gustav activated that energy. Fly, Gustav dashed out with immense speed while atomic blades appeared in his hand. The haggles behind could only see a white line zigzagging across the place and in mid-air, along with bodies getting sliced into multiple parts. Blood rained down across the battlefield as Gustav wreaked one-sided havoc upon the place. Slash, slash, slash. It only took a few minutes for him to turn over 500 haggles into incomplete corpses. Get back into the fortress, Gustav voiced out once more. The haggles, who had awe-stricken looks, did as they were told and began moving back into their weird-looking structure. Gustav leaped across the air, over the entire structure, and landed right on the other side where the new enemies were closing in on. One should be enough, he voiced out as a purplish orb cackling with red, electric arcs appeared in his line of sight. The enemies were still over 10,000 feet away, which Gustav considered being a safe distance from here. Pushing his palm forward, the orb flew with immense speed in the direction of the incoming enemies. This new haggle clan headed over-numbered in the thousands, and they even had some giant ones in their midst. They were charging forward intensely with malicious intent written all over their faces. One of them suddenly spotted the orb as it flew over. They spoke their strange tongues again as they saw it flying towards them. One of them tried to catch it, but it evaded them and flew right into the middle of the horde. In the next instant, boom! A violent blast reverberated across the vicinity as a massive purplish and reddish wave spread for miles. The haggles and everything around them were obliterated into smithereens as a big cloud of blue mixed with red and purple appeared ahead. The destruction was so immense that even the residual energy slammed heavily into the structure and caused it to quake immensely. The ground still vibrated for many seconds before everything returned to tranquility. At this point, Gustav leaped back towards the rooftop of the structure and sat down. 20 minutes left, he muttered and proceeded to close his eyes again. The haggle had looks of confusion and bewilderment as they looked up to the saver. Gustav just sat there acting like he didn't do anything. However, they knew just how much his actions had saved them. The haggles were overjoyed and glad they had just left Gustav alone. Seeing his prowess, they believed he could have obliterated them as well if he was their enemy. In a flashover, 18 minutes had gone by, and now Gustav was just counting the seconds until he was teleported back. He stood to his feet and looked around. Finally, the time has come. He knew for sure that he wouldn't miss this planet. Except for the fact that it was a fascinating-looking planet, it was not conducive for Earthlings to stay here. He most likely would be able to survive for a long time here, but there were too many dangers on this planet, and he wasn't powerful enough to say he could explore the entirety of it without getting killed. Gustav mumbled as he spotted the haggle clan leader climbing upwards to come to meet him. He was accompanied by two other word haggles. RRYYFFCCHLVVBF. The leader voiced out as he moved closer to Gustav while unwrapping an object covered by weird-looking leaves. What? You want to give that to me as a reward? Gustav said with a slightly surprised look. The leader answered affirmatively as it unwrapped what seemed to be a circular-looking jewel. Despite being transparent, it was translucent in composition, and a flicker of silver glowing light could be seen in between. Gustav could feel a weird type of energy coming from this, but there was no time to analyze it at the moment. He received it from the leader of the clan and nodded. Thanks, Gustav voiced out. Host will be teleported back to planet Earth in 5, 4, 3. It's time to go, Gustav said as he kept the stone in his storage device. 2, 1. Chapter 836. It's time to go, Gustav said as he kept the stone in his storage device. 2, 1. A bright glow encapsulated his entire figure in the next instant, and he disappeared. Zing, after he had suddenly disappeared from the spot, the word haggles stared at each other and nodded. Kumhave Carrot, the leader voiced out. This translated to, now that we have passed the sacred jewel to our savior, the wars will come to an end. Chapter 837. The buildings rose back to their initial height, and everything in the vicinity that was initially sinking. The flicker of light suddenly appeared back in the jewel as the area returned to tranquility. What was that? Gustav asked with a look of confoundment. The light flickered once more, increasing and decreasing in size occasionally. Oh, what else can you do then? Gustav asked once more. Wait. Not here. Let's get to a secluded location first, Gustav voiced out and proceeded to keep the orb in his storage device once more. It was already early in the morning, so everyone was headed out for the morning drills when the incident happened. An instructor appeared in their residential area after sensing the disturbance. Chapter 838. Come at me, Gustav. Let me see what you're made of, he added. Gustav didn't know whether to see this overly confident or cocky, but one thing he knew was that Felicio gave off a feeling different from others. An unknown feeling of assuredness and superiority. Swoosh, wasting no more time, Gustav darted forward with immense speed. It was never his intention to battle an opponent this way, but Felicio had left him no choice. He swung his right palm forward the moment he arrived behind Felicio. Palm Strike has been activated. Swai. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.